Augustus, how he really took power. Have you ever wondered if someone could hold total power, yet make everyone believe they didn't? That's exactly the subtle, unsettling secret behind Augustus, Rome's first true emperor. His real name was Octavian, and he was Julius Caesar's adopted son. For decades, Rome had been torn apart by brutal civil wars. Families lost everything, and people felt a deep, aching weariness. They craved peace more than anything, a quiet to finally mend their broken lives. Octavian saw this deep longing. He knew he couldn't simply seize the throne and declare himself king, because Romans hated kings. Their ancestors had thrown out their last monarch centuries ago. Caesar had tried something similar, and it cost him his life. Octavian was much smarter. Here's the thing. In 27 BC, Octavian stood before the Roman Senate. In a moment that would reshape the world, he gave back his power. He told them he was restoring the old republic, handing control back to the Senate and the people. Imagine the cheers as people felt hope bloom again, believing their freedom had returned. But it was a masterfully crafted act, a brilliant illusion. He kept command of the most important armies and the richest provinces, the very heart of Rome's strength. He allowed the Senate to give him new, honorable titles, like Augustus, meaning revered one, and Princeps, or first citizen. On the surface, he seemed like just one of them, but in truth, he stood quietly, absolutely, above them all. Think about a complicated game where one player seems to step back, letting others take the lead, but they're secretly holding all the best cards, subtly influencing every move everyone else makes. The players feel like they're choosing, but the path has been carefully laid out. This wasn't about brute force for Augustus. It was about gentle, persistent influence. He understood that true, lasting authority doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, guiding from the shadows, making people feel safe and free, even as their choices slowly, almost imperceptibly, shrink. It's a powerful, quiet lesson about how deep power can truly work, then and even today. Tiberius, the emperor's island of dark secrets. Have you ever felt so overwhelmed by things that you just wanted to disappear, to find a hidden place where no one could bother you? That's kind of what happened with Tiberius, the second Roman emperor. He started out with great power, but the weight of ruling seemed to crush him. So, he made a strange choice. He left the busy, demanding city of Rome behind. He sailed to a beautiful, rocky island called Capri. Here's what happened next. Capri became his private world, an island of secrets far from public eyes. From this beautiful place, Tiberius still ruled the vast Roman Empire, but the distance changed things. Whispers started, growing louder over time. People in Rome wondered what truly went on during those years on Capri. It was a place where rumors of dark deeds and extreme isolation thrived. He chose to be alone, cutting himself off from many people. Think about when you've had a really hard day, and you just want to go to your room, shut the door, and be by yourself for a while. It's like creating your own little island. But what if you stayed there for years? What if that feeling of being alone grew so big it started to twist your thoughts? For Tiberius, that isolation seemed to feed a deep suspicion. He saw enemies everywhere, even among people who used to be close. The empire's leader, hidden away, grew more paranoid, and his heart seemed to harden. It reminds us that even great power and safety can't protect us from loneliness. Sometimes, the most dangerous prisons are the ones we build for ourselves, deep inside our own minds. Even an emperor needs connection to stay truly human. Caligula, the mad emperor and his wild ideas. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone gets too much power? When there's no one to tell them no, and they can do anything they want? That's kind of what happened with Caligula. He became a Roman emperor, a leader of millions, at a very young age. At first, people liked him. He seemed kind and full of promise. But then, something truly dark began to surface. It was like the immense power, this incredible weight of leadership, went straight to his head and twisted his mind, making him think he was above all human rules. Here's the thing. History remembers Caligula for his truly wild ideas and actions, which often terrified those around him. He started believing he was a living god, not just a man. He would dress up as different deities, demanding worship. Imagine a friend picked as team captain who suddenly acts like they own the whole school, telling everyone what to do. That's a tiny hint of what Caligula did, but on a massive, terrifying scale. He ordered strange, costly things, like building a floating bridge across a huge bay just to ride his horse over it, to prove he could do anything. and he even supposedly wanted to make his favorite horse a consul, one of the highest political positions in Rome. It sounds unbelievable, but that's what unchecked power can lead to, turning leadership into a dangerous game. It makes you think deeply about how fragile a person's mind can be, especially when burdened by the heavy weight of absolute control. When there are no limits, no one to challenge your thoughts, the line between reality and dangerous fantasy can blur. It's a sad, scary lesson about what happens when one person has too much sway over the lives of others, and how vital it is for leaders, even today, to stay grounded and connected to the real world, remembering they are just human, and that true strength comes from empathy, not absolute command. Claudius, was he really poisoned? Imagine for a moment, living in a world where being at the very top also meant being in the most danger. Emperor Claudius, a man who worked hard to lead Rome, died suddenly one night, and almost immediately, whispers began. Was it just a sickness, or was something far more sinister at play? Here's the thing. In ancient Rome, especially among the powerful, sudden deaths often came with a dark cloud of suspicion. People didn't just drop dead, they were made to drop dead. If someone wanted their place, Rome was a place where ambition was like a raging fire. Everyone wanted more power, more influence. And when you're emperor, you're sitting on the biggest prize of all. This meant always looking over your shoulder, wondering who might be secretly plotting against you, even among your own family. Claudius's wife, Agrippina, was known for her fierce ambition, especially for her son Nero, to become the next emperor. It's a sad thought, isn't it, that those closest to you might also be your greatest threat. Think about how rumors spread in school when something big happens. One person says one thing, another adds a detail, and soon, a whole story is being told, even if no one knows the full truth. Now imagine those rumors could decide whether someone lived or died, and whether a new ruler took over. The stakes were incredibly high. Historical accounts mention a poisoned mushroom given at a feast. It's a quiet, chilling way to imagine an end, surrounded by people, yet utterly alone in that final, awful moment. We may never truly know the exact details of Claudius's last night. The truth about such dark events often gets buried deep under layers of power, fear, and silence. But the questions about his death make us think about the intense pressure and moral compromises people faced when power was everything. It reminds us how fragile life can be, and how easily the line between accident and intention can blur when deep human desires for control are involved. Nero, Rome on fire, and his fiddle **** Nero. Rome on fire, and his fiddle ****. Have you ever seen someone ignore a big problem while everything around them falls apart? That's how many picture Emperor Nero. His story is chilling. A fire destroyed Rome, and its leader seemed to just watch it burn. Imagine Rome, a city of millions. In 64 AD, a massive fire broke out. It raged for days, swallowing neighborhoods, tearing down homes, leaving thousands with nothing. A disaster beyond imagining. Here's what makes Nero's story infamous. Rumors spread that while Rome burned, he stood on a high point, playing his lyre like a small harp or fiddle, singing about Troy's destruction. He seemed to enjoy the spectacle, totally detached from his people's suffering. Historians argue, if he actually played music, enemies might have spread the story to make him look bad. But the idea stuck because it showed a leader seeming selfish when his people needed him most. It's like when you have a huge project due. Instead of working, you watch silly videos, ignoring the problem as the deadline rushes toward you. Nero later blamed Christians for the fire, leading to terrible persecutions, but his reputation never recovered. This story makes us think about what leadership truly means. Is it about power, or about taking responsibility when things are tough? It makes you wonder how one moment, one choice, can forever shape how history remembers you. Our actions, or even our inactions, echo through time. Nero, when an emperor killed his own mumhab, you ever thought about how far someone might go to feel truly in charge of their own life? We all want independence, right? To make our own choices, but imagine having immense power, the kind that makes you untouchable, and yet still feeling completely controlled by someone else. That's a bit like Nero's story, but it turned incredibly dark. Nero was a Roman emperor, a young man suddenly given immense authority. But here's the thing, he felt his mother, Agrippina, still pulled all the strings. She was smart, ambitious, and had even helped him get to the throne. For a while, she was his biggest supporter, but she also wanted to keep her influence, her hand in every decision. Think of it like two strong wills, constantly pushing against each other for control, but with an entire empire at stake. As Nero grew older and tasted more power, he wanted absolute freedom from her constant advice, her watchful presence, her unspoken power. This wasn't just a normal wish for independence. This was an emperor who began to see his own mother as a political rival, a threat to his total command. The fear of losing control, of being overshadowed, grew dark inside him. It wasn't just about disagreeing, it slowly became about his own survival, in his twisted mind. And so, in a decision that still chills us, Nero gave the order. He arranged for his own mother to be killed. Think about that for a moment. To feel so intensely threatened, so desperate for total power, that you would end the life of the person who gave you life. It's a profound reminder of how extreme power can warp even the deepest family bonds. Did he truly find peace after such an act? Or was he left on an even colder, lonelier throne, haunted by what he had done? True control, when pursued with such ruthless ambition, often comes at a price far too heavy to bear. Galba, too old to rule, too quick to fall. Have you ever wondered if someone can be too old to start something huge, something that needs a lot of fresh energy? Think about Galba. He was an old general, tired and 73 years old, when he was called to rule Rome. This was right after Nero's wild, destructive time. People were truly hopeful for a steady hand, for wisdom and calm. They thought an elder statesman would be exactly what a broken empire needed. But here's the thing. What seems good on paper doesn't always work out. Galba arrived in Rome, not with a warm smile, but with a stern, rigid face. He was strict, maybe too strict, for the city's delicate mood. He didn't understand that after Nero's lavish spending, people wanted more than just tough order. They longed for some generosity, a little hope. He held on to money tightly, cutting military bonuses. This angered the very soldiers who helped him become emperor. Imagine if a new principal came to your school. Everyone hopes for exciting changes, maybe new clubs. But instead, this principal is super strict, cuts all fun events, and won't listen. You'd probably feel let down, right? That's a bit like what happened with Galba. He was old, and perhaps couldn't adapt quickly enough to the needs of the new generation. He brought discipline, yes, but also a kind of coldness. Rome, still hurting, just couldn't accept it. His rule lasted only 7 short months, and so here's what happened. He fell. His own soldiers, fed up and unrewarded, quickly turned on him. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Leading an empire isn't just about age or long experience. It's about seeing what people truly need, being flexible, and inspiring those around you. Sometimes, the weight of a crown is just too heavy, not because you're weak, but because the times demand something you simply cannot give, no matter how wise you might be. It's a sad, quick lesson about power. Otho, buying the throne, losing his life. Have you ever thought about what people might do to get something they deeply want, especially when it's something huge, like leading a country? Otho showed us a powerful and sad example of this. He lived during a wild time in ancient Rome, right after Emperor Nero died. 1 year saw 4 different emperors take power, showing how messy things were. Otho was caught right in the middle of it. Here's the thing about Otho. He didn't become emperor because Romans loved him, or because he had amazing new ideas. Instead, he wanted the top job so badly that he basically just paid for it. He found the Praetorian Guard, who were the emperor's special bodyguards. He promised them a large sum of money if they would help him become emperor, and they did. They turned on the current emperor Galba, and soon Otho was declared the new ruler. It's a bit like if someone in your school really wanted to be team captain, but instead of practicing hard and showing leadership, they just bought expensive gifts for the coach. That person might get the title, but do they truly have the skill or the respect of the team? Their position would feel shaky, built on a lie. They'd always know it deep down. Otho's time as emperor was incredibly short, lasting only about 3 months. Another powerful general, Vitellius, soon arrived with his own army, ready to fight Otho for the throne. Instead of letting Rome fall into another terrible civil war, which would mean countless more lives lost, Otho made a shocking choice. He ended his own life. He said he didn't want any more Romans to die because of his ambition, because of his chase for power. It was a tragic end, a quiet, sorrowful reminder. Sometimes, the things we chase with all our might, like a high position or fame, can actually cost us everything important, even our own peace. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Maybe true strength isn't just about reaching the very top, but understanding when to step back, or knowing what truly matters beyond a title. Vitellius, the emperor who loved food too much. What happens when our greatest pleasures become our biggest traps? Think about it for a moment. Imagine having everything you could ever want, unlimited power, endless riches. For the Roman Emperor Vitellius, his great pleasure, his obsession, was food. Not just enjoying a nice meal, but eating until it hurt. Holding extravagant banquets that cost a fortune and served dish after unbelievable dish. Vitellius ruled for only a short time, less than a year, but his name lives on because of this incredible love for feasting. He would spend vast sums of the empire's money on exotic ingredients, even holding 3 or 4 huge meals a day. He'd make himself sick to start eating all over again. Here's the thing. While Rome faced problems like wars and financial troubles, Vitellius was focused on his next meal. It wasn't about hunger. It was about an emptiness he tried to fill with more and more. This is a deep lesson, one we can all understand. Think about something you love doing, like playing a video game or watching your favorite shows. It feels great at first, right? But what if you did it constantly, ignoring your homework, your friends, and even sleep? That fun thing stops being fun. It becomes a problem, a kind of prison, and that's why it matters. Vitellius let this one desire consume him. He chose fleeting comfort over his duties as emperor, over the well-being of his people. His story reminds us that even good things, when taken to an extreme, can lead to ruin. There's a quiet sorrow in chasing endless pleasure, because true contentment often comes from balance, from purpose, and from connection to others, not from a constantly full plate. What we truly seek isn't usually found at the bottom of another lavish meal, but perhaps in how we choose to live our days, finding peace in enough, rather than always wanting more. Domitian, the emperor who called himself a god. Have you ever wondered what it's like to have so much power that you start to believe you're not just a person anymore, but something more, like, truly special, even divine? That's kind of what happened with Domitian, an emperor of ancient Rome. He was a real person, a leader who held immense power over millions. But here's the thing, he actually started demanding that people call him Lord and God. Think about that for a second. Most Roman emperors only became gods after they died, as a way to honor their memory. But Domitian wanted it now, while he was still alive and breathing, walking among everyone. This wasn't just a fancy phrase he liked. This title, Lord and God, was how he saw himself, and how he insisted everyone else see him. It's a bit like if someone in your class, maybe the captain of a sports team, suddenly told everyone they had to treat them like a king or queen, never question their decisions, and praise everything they did, as if they were flawless. It would feel strange, right? You'd wonder why they needed that so badly. For Domitian, this demand for worship was a way to make sure no one ever challenged his rule. No one dared to think they were his equal. It was about building an unshakable fortress of power, born from a deep, almost desperate need to be admired and feared. And that's why it matters. When a leader, or anyone with power, reaches for such extreme worship, demanding that kind of awe, it often comes from a place of insecurity, or perhaps a profound loneliness at the very top. It's a sad kind of strength, built on fear and forced respect, rather than genuine admiration. This urge to be seen as a god shows us how immense power can twist someone's view of themselves, making them forget their own human limits and the simple humanity of everyone around them. What does it truly cost to demand worship instead of patiently earning it? It usually costs a lot, not just for the emperor, but for the soul of his empire, and for everyone living under such a ruler. It leaves a heavy, uncomfortable feeling, this need for forced devotion. Domitian, his reign of fear and spies. Have you ever felt like someone was always watching you, even when you knew you hadn't done anything wrong? Like every word you spoke might be heard by the wrong person. Imagine living every single day with that heavy feeling. That's the world emperor Domitian, created for the people of Rome. He ruled not just with laws, but with a deep, chilling fear. Domitian was often paranoid, worried that people were plotting against him, trying to take his power. So, he built a vast network of spies, or informers, as they were called back then. These weren't just secret agents. They were often ordinary citizens, encouraged to report on their neighbors, friends, even family members. People would whisper about others, sometimes for real reasons, sometimes just to gain favor or settle a grudge. And Domitian believed these reports, often punishing people harshly without much proof. Think about what that does to a community. It's like being in a group project at school, where you know one person is always reporting every little thing to the teacher, even small mistakes or innocent jokes. It makes everyone cautious, guarded. You start to second-guess every conversation, every laugh. That constant worry, that deep distrust, became a way of life in Rome. People learned to keep their thoughts to themselves, to speak in hushed tones, to never truly relax. This system might have made Domitian feel secure for a while, but it came at a terrible cost. It slowly broke down the trust between people, leaving a society filled with suspicion and silence. It makes you think, doesn't it? True strength might not come from making people afraid, but from building a world where they feel safe enough to be honest and open. Commodus, the emperor who wanted to be a gladiator. Have you ever felt like you were born into the wrong role? Like everyone expected you to be one thing, but your heart pulled you in a totally different direction? Imagine being the most powerful person in the world, the Roman emperor, seen as almost a god. That was Commodus. But here's the thing, instead of ruling the vast empire, handling laws and wars, he deeply, truly wanted to be a gladiator. For Romans, being an emperor meant serious business. It meant dignity, wisdom, leading armies. Gladiators, though, were often slaves or criminals, fighting for entertainment, usually to their deaths. It was a brutal, low-status profession. So, for an emperor to step into the arena, covered in lion skins, fighting with a sword, it wasn't just strange. It was shocking. It was like the president deciding he wanted to be a professional wrestler actually in the ring, performing for crowds. People would wonder, what's going on? Does he truly understand his job? This wasn't just a hobby for Commodus. He was obsessed. He called himself Hercules, paraded in his outfit, and fought in hundreds of staged battles. He even charged the city a huge fee to watch him fight. It made many wonder if he was escaping the heavy burden of leadership, or if he just felt more alive in the roar of the crowd than in the quiet halls of power. Maybe he felt unseen, even with all that power, and found a different kind of recognition in the arena. It makes you think about how we all search for who we are. Sometimes, the path laid out for us isn't the one we truly want. Even with immense power and expectation, Commodus reminds us that finding your own identity, even if it seems strange to others, can be a powerful, complicated human desire. It asks us to consider what it means to be truly yourself, especially when the whole world expects you to be something else entirely. Commodus, his own family planned his death cairn. You imagine someone you love, someone from your own family, wanting you gone. Not just gone from their life, but gone forever. It's a heavy thought, and it's a terrifying truth for a Roman emperor named Commodus. He inherited the greatest empire in the world from his father, Marcus Aurelius, who was one of Rome's most respected and wise leaders. Everyone, especially those closest to him, expected Commodus to follow in his father's footsteps, to be a calm, just, and intelligent ruler. But here's the thing, he didn't. Instead, Commodus became utterly obsessed with himself, with gladiator games, and with acting like a god. He truly believed he was Hercules. He didn't care about the day-to-day work of governing a vast empire, and his reckless decisions started to hurt Rome deeply. Think about it like a group project in school, where one person is supposed to be the leader, but they just goof off, make bad calls, and actually risk everyone failing. The rest of the group, even if they're good friends, would feel they had to do something drastic to save their grade. Right, they'd have to protect their hard work and the whole project. For Commodus, the project was the entire Roman Empire, and he was destroying it from the inside out with his cruelty and neglect. The people around him, his most trusted advisors, even his own sister Lucilla, watched in growing horror. They saw him becoming more unpredictable, more dangerous. They knew that if he continued on this path, Rome itself might collapse into chaos. So, a small, desperate group, including members of his own household, quietly began to plan. They decided the only way to save Rome, and perhaps their own lives, was to remove Commodus from power permanently. This wasn't just a cold political move. It was a deeply personal and heartbreaking betrayal, born out of sheer desperation and a terrible, painful sense of duty to something bigger than family. It makes you really wonder about the unbearable weight of absolute power, and the incredibly difficult choices people sometimes face when everything they cherish is at stake. Even the strongest family loyalty has its limits when the very foundation of society is threatened by one person's unchecked actions. Pertinax, a good man, a greedy guard, a short life, Have you ever felt like you were trying your absolute best to do what's right, only to be completely shut down by others who just didn't care? That's a little like the story of Pertinax. He stepped into power after the truly awful Emperor Commodus, a man who had left Rome broken and fearful. Pertinax, though, was different. He was a good man, a former teacher and soldier, who wanted to heal his struggling empire. He dreamed of bringing back honesty, discipline, and a sense of purpose. He believed deeply in fairness, and in putting the people first, even when it was the hardest path. But here's the tough truth. Sometimes, those who benefit from the mess don't want it cleaned up. Rome had elite soldiers, the Praetorian Guard. Their job was to protect the emperor, but they had grown incredibly powerful and very, very greedy. Commodus had spoiled them rotten, paying them huge sums just to keep them loyal. When Pertinax took over, he saw this waste and tried to stop it. He wanted to save Rome's money for important things, not just for the guards' endless demands. This idea of discipline, of not getting special treatment, made the Praetorian Guard furious. Think of it like this. Imagine a team where one player always gets to cheat on the rules. Then, a new coach comes in and says, "No more special treatment. Everyone plays fair." Some players might cheer, but the one who used to cheat would probably get really angry and resist. The Praetorian Guard were those angry players, except their resistance wasn't just complaining. It was much, much more dangerous. They didn't care about Rome's future. They only cared about their own comfort and money. So, this good man Pertinax, who only sought to restore honor, became a tragic target. The Praetorian Guard, fueled by anger and selfish desires, stormed his palace. He faced them, calmly, trying to reason, to remind them of their duty. But their lust for money was louder than any wise word. In a brutal flash, he was murdered. His reign lasted a mere 86 days. It was a terribly short and heartbreaking end for someone who tried so genuinely to lead with integrity. His story reminds us how fragile goodness can be, how easily a noble effort can be crushed by the raw, ugly power of greed. Sometimes, a person's best intentions just aren't enough. Didius Julianus, the emperor who bought Rome half. You ever wondered if everything has a price? Even something as huge as leading an entire empire. For a strange moment in ancient Rome, it truly seemed to be true. Imagine waking up one day to find the highest office, the emperor's throne, was up for auction. That's exactly what happened when a man named Didius Julianus stepped forward. The year was 193 AD, and chaos gripped Rome. The previous emperor, Pertinax, had been murdered by his own elite guards, the Praetorian Guard. These guards were meant to protect the emperor, but they became greedy and powerful. Instead of choosing a new leader fairly, they made a shocking decision. They would sell the empire. It sounds unbelievable, but it's real. They stood on the city walls, shouting out offers, waiting for rich men to bid for the crown. Think about it like this. Imagine your school's student council president position. It's an important role, meant to represent all students. But what if, after the last president left, the staff just auctioned off the job, not to the person with the best ideas or who cared most, but to whoever's family could pay the most money? It would feel completely wrong, wouldn't it? That job isn't about money. It's about earning trust and serving others. Didius Julianus paid a huge sum for the emperorship. He won the bid, but he lost something far more important, the respect of his people. No one saw him as a true ruler, because he hadn't earned it. He bought a title, but he couldn't buy loyalty or genuine power. His reign lasted only 66 days before he was overthrown and killed. His story reminds us that some things, like true leadership and the faith of a nation, can never be bought. They must be earned with honor. Septimius Severus, ruthless, rise to power, and bloody battles. Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire country feels like it's breaking apart? What kind of person steps forward then? That's where we find Septimius Severus, a man who rose from the edges of the Roman Empire to seize its very heart. After one emperor was suddenly killed, Rome plunged into a chaotic mess. Many powerful generals saw their chance. They all believed they should rule. But here's the thing, only one could win, and the path to victory was soaked in blood. Septimius Severus didn't wait politely for his turn. He didn't ask for permission. He moved with a fierce ambition, driven by a desire to bring order, but also by a hunger for control. He gathered his armies and marched, not just to claim power, but to crush anyone who dared to stand in his way. Imagine being in a big competition, like a school election or a sports championship, where suddenly the rules disappear. and people will do literally anything to win. It's that desperate. Only with entire nations and thousands of lives at stake. He fought other contenders across vast distances, in battles that were brutal and terrifying. His victory wasn't just one lucky strike, it was a long, bloody campaign. He defeated his rivals, one by one, leaving a trail of death and destruction. And that's why it matters. This kind of power, won through such extreme violence, carries a heavy, unspoken cost. It brings a temporary peace, yes, but it's a peace bought with the suffering of countless people. It makes you think, doesn't it? How much does that kind of victory truly weigh on a leader's soul, and on the future of an empire? Does it ever really feel like true peace? Caracalla, the brother who couldn't be spared. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to share everything with your sibling? Not just toys or chores, but a kingdom, an empire. That's what happened with two brothers, Caracalla and Geta, their father. A powerful emperor named Septimius Severus told them to get along and rule Rome together. He wanted them to be a team, to protect their legacy. But here's the thing about power. It can be a lonely seat, and some people want it all for themselves. Caracalla felt this strongly. He didn't want to share the glory, the influence, or the throne with his younger brother. It was like two captains trying to steer the same ship, but one believed he was the only true leader. The tension grew, a silent storm brewing between them. It's hard to imagine that kind of jealousy and ambition growing so deep, so dark, that it eclipses everything else, even family bonds. Think about it like this. Maybe you and a sibling are trying to work on a big school project together. You both have ideas, but one of you keeps trying to take over, wanting all the credit, feeling like their way is the only way. Imagine that feeling, but instead of just a project, it's control over millions of lives. Caracalla's desire to rule alone was so strong, so overwhelming, that it led to a truly heartbreaking act. One day, he lured Geta to their mother's chambers, pretending he wanted to talk, to make peace. But it was a trap. In the very arms of their own mother, Julia Domna Caracalla had his brother murdered. Can you picture the horror, the ultimate betrayal? It wasn't just a political move, it was a wound ripped into the heart of a family, a mother witnessing the unthinkable. Caracalla then tried to erase Geta from history, tearing down his statues and making sure no one spoke his name. But some memories, especially the painful ones, can never truly be wiped away. This story reminds us of the terrible cost of unchecked ambition, and how even the closest relationships can be shattered by a hunger for absolute control. It makes you wonder what truly matters in the end: power or peace, rule or family. Caracalla, massacres in the name of an emperor. Have you ever thought about what happens when anger and suspicion take over a person's mind completely? Imagine if that person also held the most immense power. This is the story of Emperor Caligula. His reign was a dark time, marked by a deep, unsettling fear that made him lash out with terrible violence. It all started early. Caracalla killed his own brother Geta to become the sole emperor, and that was just the beginning. After Geta's death, Caracalla ordered a massive purge. Thousands of people, many innocent, were executed because he suspected they might still be loyal to his brother. It was a reign of terror, where a simple rumor could mean the end of your life. But here's the thing. His cruelty didn't stop in Rome. Later, he visited the great city of Alexandria in Egypt. Some people there had made jokes about him, maybe even mocked him a little. And this small slight, this bit of disrespect, sent Caracalla into a rage. He pretended to offer peace and hold a banquet, but it was a trap. He ordered his soldiers to surround the city and slaughter its citizens, young and old, men and women. The streets ran red with blood. Thousands died, not for rebellion, but for a few jokes and the emperor's wounded pride. Think of it this way. It's like when a small argument with a friend spirals out of control because one person refuses to let go of their anger. Only, in Caracalla's case, his anger wasn't just words, it was swords and spears, and he had the power to make thousands suffer for his own feelings. So, what does this tell us? It shows us how terrifyingly destructive unchecked power can be. When a leader lets fear and anger guide their actions, the cost is unimaginable. It teaches us that true strength isn't about crushing everyone who upsets you, but about controlling your own dark impulses. And sometimes, the most infamous emperors are just people consumed by their own inner battles, with everyone else paying the price. Macronus, the first emperor who wasn't a senator. Have you ever felt like there were certain clubs or groups where only specific kinds of people belonged? Maybe they had a certain family name, or a lot of money, or went to a fancy school. Well, imagine ancient Rome, where for hundreds of years the emperors almost always came from a small group of powerful old families, men who were born into the Senate. But then, a man named Macronus came along. And here's the thing, he wasn't a senator, not by birth, not by connection, not by tradition. Macrinus was a lawyer, and then a military man, who worked his way up through sheer skill and smarts. He wasn't from a noble house, and that made him different, maybe even an outsider. Think of it like this. Imagine your school always choosing class presidents only from a few families who've been at the school forever. Then, suddenly, someone new, who just moved to town and isn't part of any of those established groups, somehow becomes president. That's Mac. He reached the very top, not because of who his family was, but because he was good at his job. But here's the problem with breaking old rules. While it might seem fair, it also makes others nervous. The old senators, with their ancient family names and long histories, didn't trust him. They saw him as someone who didn't truly belong. He was an emperor, yes, but he wasn't one of them. It was like a silent tension, a feeling that things weren't quite right. He tried to fit in, tried to act like a senator, but deep down, everyone knew he wasn't. His story makes you wonder, does true power really come from who you were born to be, or from what you managed to achieve through your own effort? And when someone steps outside the expected lines like Macronus did, how much courage does that truly take? And how much loneliness comes with that kind of journey? Sometimes, reaching for something new and different can feel like standing on a very lonely peak, high above everyone else, with no one quite understanding your path. Elagabalus, the teenage emperor's strange ways. Imagine being just a teenager, younger than most high schoolers, and suddenly you're in charge of an entire empire. How would that feel? That's what happened to Elagabalus. He became Roman emperor when he was only 14. But here's the thing, he wasn't like other emperors. His time on the throne was short. Only 4 years, but those years were really strange. Elagabalus was more interested in his sun god, Elagabalus, than in running the huge Roman Empire. He even tried to make this god the most important god in Rome, above all others. This was a big deal, because Romans had many gods, and they didn't like change forced on them. People expected their emperor to be a strong military leader or a wise lawmaker. Elagabalus seemed to care more about lavish parties and wild, colorful rituals. It must have been confusing for everyone. Imagine being a regular kid, then being given all the power in the world. Maybe he felt lost, or maybe he simply didn't understand the job. He seemed to live in his own world, creating rules that felt bizarre to most Romans. For example, he dressed in flowing silks, unlike the traditional Roman togas, and held banquets where guests were showered with flowers, or even live birds. It was like he was playing a game, but the stakes were real. Think about when you get a new video game, and you skip the tutorial because you think you know how to play. You start making all sorts of weird decisions, and the game quickly falls apart. That's a bit like what happened. He was given the most complex game in the world, ruling an empire, and he didn't follow the rules or understand the consequences. His story makes you wonder about power itself. What happens when it lands in inexperienced hands, especially when those hands belong to someone still figuring out who they are? It shows us that true leadership isn't just about having authority. It's also about understanding people, respecting traditions, and realizing the heavy weight of responsibility. His reign was a brief, dazzling, and ultimately sad chapter, reminding us how much impact one young person's choices can have on millions. Elagabalus. When worship got really weird, have you ever felt like someone tried to change something really important to you? Not just a small thing, but a deep belief or a long-standing tradition. Imagine that feeling, amplified by immense power. That's a bit like what happened with the young Roman emperor He came to power at just 14, on the biggest stage. Here's the thing, Roman religion wasn't about one god. It was about many gods and traditions, all working for Rome's good. But Elagabalus had a different idea. He was a high priest of a sun god from Syria, a god called He decided this sun god wasn't just a god. He was the god, the most important one, even more vital than Rome's ancient Jupiter. He brought a sacred black, cone-shaped stone, called Elagabal, all the way to Rome and built a huge temple for it on Palatine Hill. He didn't just ask people to worship this new god, he tried to force it. Imagine if your town, cheering for the local team, suddenly had a new mayor, This mayor says everyone has to switch loyalty to a new team and give up their old flag. It would feel like deep disrespect. Elagabalus paraded this stone, dressed in exotic silks, performing wild rituals. He even married a Vestal virgin, a truly shocking act against Roman sacred laws. This wasn't just about religious change. It was about power, identity, and tradition crashing together. People felt their very foundations shake. It shows how trouble starts when one person's belief tries to erase a people's sacred history. It makes you wonder, what happens when devotion becomes dominance? Can true faith ever be forced? It reminds us to respect what others hold dear. Severus Alexander, young ruler, powerful mum. Sad end. Have you ever felt like someone was always telling you what to do, even when you were ready to make your own choices? Imagine that feeling, but multiplied by 1,000,000, because you're the emperor of Rome. That was Severus Alexander. He was just 14 when he took the throne. But here's the thing, he wasn't really in charge. His mother, Julia Mamaea, was a very strong woman. She made most of the big decisions. She protected him, but maybe too much. It was like she was trying to keep him safe in a world that was just too harsh. Think of it like this. You might be really good at school, getting great grades, but if your parent always speaks for you, always handles all the tough conversations, sometimes you don't learn how to stand up for yourself when things get really hard. In Rome, this was a huge problem. The soldiers, big, tough men, didn't respect a young emperor who seemed to be hiding behind his mum. They needed a strong leader, someone who would lead them into battle, not someone who seemed hesitant or controlled by his family. So, when trouble came, Severus Alexander and his mother were on a military campaign. The soldiers grew angry. They saw him as weak, and that's why it matters. In a brutal twist of fate, both he and his mother were killed by their own troops. It's a sad story about a young boy, pushed into a role he wasn't ready for, and a mother who tried so hard to protect him, but perhaps ended up shielding him from the very lessons he needed to survive. Sometimes, even with the best intentions, power can be a dangerous thing, especially when it's not truly your own. It reminds us how heavy the crown can be, and how quickly it can fall. Maximinus Thrax, the giant soldier who scared everyone. Have you ever met someone so big, so imposing, that just their presence made you feel small? Imagine that person, but even bigger, strong enough to rip roots from the ground. His shadow seemed to stretch longer than anyone else's. This was Maximinus Thrax, a Roman emperor whose very appearance was a dark secret, a weapon in itself. He walked through the world like a force of nature. He wasn't from a noble family. He started as a simple soldier, a huge man from a far-off land called Thrace. Legends say he was over 8 feet tall, with a thumb so large he wore his wife's bracelet as a ring. Among other soldiers, he was like a giant next to regular people. Here's the thing, his size wasn't just impressive, it was terrifying. This helped him rise quickly. People were scared, yes, but also in awe of his brute strength. He became emperor not through politics, but because the army loved and feared him enough to make him their leader. This was a new way to gain the throne. Think about a huge thunderstorm, thunder cracking so loud it shakes your house. That's sudden, raw power, something you can't argue with, can't fight, something that just is. That's a bit like Maximinus Thrax in human form. His physical power made people nervous, always on edge. He ruled with a heavy hand, distrusting everyone, especially senators who looked down on his humble beginnings. His reign was short, but marked by a constant feeling of dread. Like living under a dark, heavy cloud. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Does true power come from a person's size, or the size of their spirit and ideas? Maximinus showed us that immense physical presence can take you far, even to the highest seat. But here's the problem. It might also trap you in a lonely world of fear, both what you cause and what you carry. And that's why it matters. Fear, even when it gives power, can isolate you completely and lead to a fall. Gordian eye, and two. Their short, sad end. Have you ever felt like a huge responsibility landed on you, out of nowhere? Like suddenly, everyone expects you to fix everything, even when you didn't ask for the job? Well, here's what happened to two men, a father and son, Gordian I and Gordian II. In ancient Rome, the empire was in a really tough spot. The old emperor was cruel, and people were tired. So, the Roman Senate, hoping for a fresh start, picked Gordian I. He was an old, respected leader, and they wanted him to take charge. He didn't really want the power, but it was thrust upon him, and his son, Gordian II, by his side. Imagine that pressure. It's kind of like if your school was having a really bad year, and suddenly, without warning, you and your parent were told to run the whole school, fix all its problems, and make everyone happy. It sounds overwhelming, right? That's a bit like what the Gordians faced, but on an empire-wide scale, with actual armies and angry governors. Their reign, the time they were emperors, lasted only 22 days. That's less than a month. A rival governor quickly gathered an army and fought against Gordian II. Tragically, Gordian II died in that battle. When his father, Gordian I, heard the news, his heart broke. Losing his son, and feeling the crushing weight of an empire he never truly wanted, was too much. He decided to end his own life, just weeks after becoming emperor. It's a truly sad story, isn't it? It shows us that even the highest position, the greatest power, can bring immense sorrow and pressure. Sometimes, what looks like a grand opportunity can become a burden too heavy to carry. Their short, sad end reminds us how fragile life can be, and how quickly dreams or nightmares can play out in the rush of history. Pupienus and Balbinus, co-emperors who hated each other. Have you ever had to work on a school project with someone you just couldn't get along with? Maybe you had different ideas, or you just rubbed each other the wrong way. Now, imagine if that project wasn't just a grade, but the actual leadership of an entire empire. That's pretty much what happened with Pupienus and Balbinus in ancient Rome. Rome was in a really tough spot then. Things were chaotic. The Senate, Rome's powerful leaders, desperately needed to bring order. So, they tried something new. They picked two older, respected senators to rule as Pupienus and Balbinus were supposed to balance each other out. It seemed like a smart plan, but here's the thing. Both were chosen for wisdom, but they absolutely couldn't stand each other. From day one, their personal dislike got in the way. They argued over who sat where, who spoke first, even which palace rooms they'd use. It was like two brilliant team captains, so busy trying to outshine each other that they forgot to win the game together. You could feel the tension, the rivalry, always there. This constant bickering at the top made Rome weak. How could the empire be strong when its two most powerful leaders were constantly at war? Even if it was just words and icy stares. Their own Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers protecting them, saw this division. They couldn't respect leaders who couldn't even respect each other. In the end, their joint rule lasted only 99 days. Their constant fighting meant they were easily overthrown. It's a sad lesson. It shows that even powerful positions can crumble if people can't put aside feelings for the bigger picture. True leadership often comes from finding a way to work together, even when it feels impossible. Philip the Arab, was he a killer or a peacemaker? Imagine being in charge, holding immense power. Would you choose peace, even if it meant risking weakness? Or would you fight, even if it meant shedding blood? This was the heavy question that likely weighed on Philip the Arab, a Roman emperor from long ago. He came from outside the usual Roman noble families, making his rise to power quite remarkable. Here's the thing about powerful people in history. Their stories are rarely simple. Some records tell of Philip making peace with the Persian Empire, a longtime enemy. This saved countless lives, halting years of brutal fighting. It sounds like the act of a peacemaker, someone who truly valued human life. But then, other stories whisper of how he became emperor. He might have been involved in the death of his predecessor, Emperor Gordian III. To rise to the very top in ancient Rome often meant a ruthless streak, a willingness to remove obstacles, sometimes permanently. So, was he a killer, driven by ambition? Think about a character in a movie you love. Sometimes, even the hero makes choices that feel wrong, or a villain has a surprising moment of kindness. People are like that, full of different sides. We all carry a mix of intentions and actions. Philip's legacy teaches us that judging someone simply as good or bad is almost impossible over time. We see glimmers of a man who sought stability, who celebrated Rome's 1000th birthday, and yet the shadow of violence likely followed his ascent. His story reminds us to look deeper, beyond easy labels, and try to understand the many layers of a human heart, even one that ruled an empire. Decius, the emperor who fought Christians. Have you ever felt like you had to choose between what you believed and what others expected? That's what happened in the Roman Empire with Emperor Decius. He saw Christianity, a new religion, as a real threat to Rome's traditional way of life. This wasn't about hate, but about keeping old traditions alive. For Romans, worshipping the ancient gods was key to being a good citizen. It was a sign of loyalty to your country. If you didn't, people thought you were going against Rome itself. Christians, though, only worshipped their one god. They couldn't sacrifice to the Roman gods. Not even a tiny bit, because their faith forbade it. This was a big problem. Emperor Decius demanded that everyone prove loyalty by making a public sacrifice. If you did, you got an official certificate. If you didn't, you faced serious trouble, even death. Think about a team project. Everyone needs to do their part for it to succeed. Decius saw Christians as not playing their part in the Roman team of traditional religion. He worried it would make the empire weaker. He truly believed Rome needed everyone on the same page, worshipping the same gods, to stay strong. It's a sad story of two very different ways of seeing the world clashing. Decius believed he was saving Rome, but his choices caused so much suffering. It makes you wonder how often people do hard things because they truly believe they are right, even when it hurts others. Sometimes, what we hold dearest can clash in ways that change history forever. Trebonianus Gallus blamed for a plague and bad deals. So picture this: you're the boss, maybe of a group project or a sports team, and then everything goes wrong. Not because of anything you directly did, but because of, well, life. This is kind of what happened to an emperor named Trebonianus Gallus. He ruled Rome for only 2 short years. During that time, a horrible plague swept the empire. It was a sickness that stole lives, like a modern epidemic, but without any understanding of medicine. People saw it as a sign from angry gods. And who did they blame? The emperor. Gallus was at the top, so he got the blame. It's like planning an outdoor party, and a giant storm ruins everything. Everyone still looks at you, the planner, even if you had no control over the weather. Then, there were the bad deals. Rome had fierce enemy groups, like the Goths, pushing at their borders. Gallus made peace treaties, agreeing to pay them regularly. Too many Romans. This felt like weakness, not peace. It was like paying a bully to leave you alone, instead of standing up. People felt betrayed, believing their leader wasn't strong enough. Imagine that pressure. Being in charge while a deadly illness spreads and your people feel unsafe from outside threats. Gallus tried his best, making sacrifices to the gods, trying to keep peace. But sometimes, problems are just too big. It shows us that even leaders, even emperors, can be caught in a storm. And sometimes, unfairly, they take the fall for things no one person could fix. It's a tough lesson about how hard it is to lead when bad things happen beyond your control. Aemilianus, emperor. For just a few months, have you ever worked really hard for something, only for it to be gone right after you got it? Imagine becoming ruler of the most powerful empire, then losing it in a blink. That's what happened to Aemilianus. He was a Roman general who, briefly, wore the emperor's purple robes. Power in ancient Rome, especially then, was often like trying to hold on to smoke. The Roman Empire was in a tough spot. Generals fought constantly, and emperors came and went fast. Aemilianus rose quickly. His soldiers believed in him after he won a battle, cheering him as their new emperor. Imagine that moment, the roar, the heavy crown, the feeling of triumph. But often, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. It's like being chosen first for a team, feeling that excitement, only for the game to be called off because of a sudden storm. All that anticipation, all that glory, just vanishes. For Aemilianus, his storm was another powerful general, Valerian, marching towards Rome. Aemilianus's own soldiers, seeing the massive force, quickly lost faith. The very men who had made him emperor turned against him. After only about 88 days, less than 3 months, Aemilianus was killed. His reign, his moment of supreme power, was over before most people even knew it began. It makes you think, doesn't it, about how fragile life can be, how quickly big dreams turn to dust. Even the most powerful position couldn't guarantee safety or a lasting legacy. It shows that true strength isn't just about how much power you gain, but what you do with it, and how you face moments when everything falls apart. His story still echoes with a quiet, sad wisdom about ambition and fate. Valerian, captured by enemies. A shocking end. Have you ever thought about what it means to be truly powerful, and then to lose everything? Imagine being the leader of the greatest empire in the world. Someone seen almost like a god, and then suddenly, you're helpless. That's exactly what happened to Emperor Valerian. His story isn't just sad, it's one of the most unbelievable and painful moments in Roman history. So, here's what happened. Valerian ruled Rome during a very difficult time. The empire was huge, but it was being attacked from all sides. A mighty enemy called the Sassanid Persians was a huge threat in the east. Valerian, as emperor, had to lead his armies to fight them. This was a critical moment for Rome. But then came the unthinkable. In 260 AD, something happened that no Roman could have imagined. Emperor Valerian, the supreme commander, was captured alive by the Persian king Shapur. I think about that for a second. It's like your country's president or a huge sports star, someone you admire so much, being taken prisoner by the opposing team right in the middle of the most important game. It shattered Roman pride and showed just how vulnerable even the most powerful person could be. Here's the thing. Ancient history wasn't kind. The Persians knew how much capturing Valerian would hurt Rome, not just physically, but deep down in its spirit. Stories say King Shapur used Valerian as a personal footstool when he mounted his horse, a daily, terrible reminder of Rome's defeat. And after he died, the ultimate insult, his skin was supposedly stripped, stuffed, and displayed in a Persian temple. It was a brutal, public show of power, meant to crush Roman hope. This wasn't just losing a battle, it was a profound, soul-crushing humiliation for an entire civilization. It makes you wonder about the true cost of war, and how even the highest can fall so far. Gallienus, empire falling apart. While he partied, have you ever seen something really important start to fall apart? But the person who was supposed to fix it just didn't seem to care. Here's what happened with Emperor Gallienus. His time as emperor, in the mid-200s AD, was one of the scariest periods for the Roman Empire. Invaders like the Goths and the Persians were constantly attacking Rome's borders. Inside the empire, different generals kept declaring themselves emperor, sparking brutal civil wars. The economy was a mess, with money becoming almost worthless, and people struggled just to feed their families. Everything felt like it was crumbling. But while the Roman world was on fire, slowly burning round him, what was Gallienus doing? He spent a lot of his time at lavish parties and banquets. He loved art, theater, and even spent his energy writing poetry. He surrounded himself with philosophers and pursued his own interests, seemingly detached from the dire situation. Imagine if you had a huge group project due tomorrow, and your house was a complete disaster, and maybe your little sibling was crying for help. Instead of dealing with any of it, you just put on headphones and played your favorite video game all night, ignoring the growing chaos. You know, deep down the problems are there, urgent and getting worse. But you choose to look away. This wasn't just about personal choices for Gallienus, it was about the fate of millions. People needed a strong, present leader who understood their fear and pain. They needed someone to bravely face the threats and try to hold their world together. Instead, they often saw an emperor who seemed to prefer his own comfort and hobbies over the suffering of his people. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What happens when those in power turn their back on serious trouble? Does ignoring a huge problem really make it go away? Or does that silence just let the trouble grow, louder and more destructive, until everything truly breaks? Sometimes, the hardest part of being strong is simply choosing to see the truth, even when it's scary and deeply unpleasant. Claudius Gothicus, the one who died of plague. Have you ever thought about what it means to be truly powerful? We often imagine emperors standing tall, leading armies, making huge decisions that changed the world. Claudius Gothicus was one of those emperors. He was tough, a real warrior, famous for fighting back the Goths, a strong enemy threatening Rome. People looked up to him. They believed he could solve anything, that he was the hero they desperately needed. But even the mightiest among us can face an enemy no shield can block, no army can defeat. For Claudius, that enemy wasn't another empire or a rebellious general. It was something invisible, quiet, and terrifying. The plague. Think about that for a moment. This was a time when medicine wasn't what it is today. When a sickness spread, it swept through cities like a dark cloud, taking lives without mercy. People didn't understand how it worked, only that it brought fever, pain, and eventually, death. It was known as the Plague of Cyprian, and it had already been causing so much sorrow across the Roman world for years. Imagine a whole city feeling constantly afraid, not knowing who would be next, watching friends and family fall ill. It's like that helpless feeling you get when a bad flu goes around your school, and it seems like everyone is getting sick. But this was 1,000 times worse, with no easy cure. So, here's what happened to Claudius Gothicus. After all his battles, all his victories, he too was struck down by this unseen force. In 270 AD, The great emperor, the hero who saved Rome from a visible threat, simply fell ill and died. It wasn't on a battlefield, surrounded by his soldiers. It was likely in a quiet room, succumbing to a sickness that didn't care about his title or his strength. It reminds us that no matter how powerful someone seems, we are all just human. We are all vulnerable to the quiet, sometimes unstoppable, forces of the world around us. His story makes us pause and think about how fragile life is, even for an emperor. Aurelian, building walls, battling everyone. Very harsh. Have you ever felt so worried, so exposed, that you just wanted to put up a huge, thick wall around yourself, or around something precious, to keep it safe? That's a bit like Aurelian, an emperor who stepped up to lead Rome when things were truly fractured. Imagine Rome not as a mighty empire, but like a beautiful old house with cracks everywhere, and strangers constantly trying to force their way in. That was Rome during his time, a period historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. Aurelian wasn't gentle. He had an iron will, forged in countless battles. He knew he had to be incredibly tough, because the Roman Empire was truly on the brink of collapse, threatened from all directions. He spent almost his entire rule fighting, pushing back barbarians from the north, and bringing rebellious parts of the empire, like the Gallic Empire in the west and the Palmyrene Empire in the east, back under Rome's control. Most famously, he built those massive, strong Aurelian walls right around the city of Rome itself, a clear sign of how much danger everyone felt. Imagine having to be the person who always has to be strong, always has to fight, with no break. The crushing weight of an entire, struggling civilization rested on his shoulders. He saw invaders nearing Rome, a fear not felt in centuries, and felt a deep, chilling terror for his people's very survival. Because of this, he made decisions that were very harsh, often showing little mercy, believing it was the only way to pull Rome back from the edge. Think of it like being in charge of a school club that's completely disorganized and about to shut down. You have to step up, make really strict rules, maybe even upset some friends, or kick out people who aren't helping, just to save the club. It's not fun, and people might not like you for it, but you believe it's the absolute only way to keep things from completely collapsing and to protect what everyone values. Aurelian's intense reign shows something important about leadership. Sometimes, to protect what you deeply love, you have to become the stern, unforgiving leader. His story reminds us how profound fear, even when it leads to great harshness, often comes from a desperate, deep desire to keep things safe and whole. But it also makes us wonder about the heavy cost of that kind of safety, and the incredibly lonely burden carried by those who feel they must be the ones to provide it. Tacitus, the old emperor who didn't want the job. Have you ever been handed a huge responsibility you truly didn't want? Maybe it was leading a group project, or being picked for something you felt totally unprepared for. Imagine that feeling, but multiplied 1,000 times, with the fate of an entire empire resting on your shoulders. That's a bit like what happened to a man named Tacitus. He was old, respected, and probably dreaming of a quiet retirement, maybe reading scrolls by a warm fire. But the year was 275 AD, and Rome was a mess. Emperors were coming and going faster than the seasons changed. People were scared. So, the Senate, Rome's council of wise men, looked around for someone, anyone, who could bring calm. And their eyes landed on Tacitus. He was a senator, known for being fair and honest. He wasn't some power-hungry general or a schemer. He begged them, really. He pleaded to be left alone. He said he was too old, too tired. But they insisted. They needed his wisdom, his steady hand. It's like your entire class voting you president when all you want to do is work quietly in the back. The pressure must have been immense, a heavy cloak thrown over his shoulders. Here's the thing. Tacitus eventually gave in. He accepted the job, not because he wanted the glory or the power, but because he felt it was his duty. He tried his best, ruling for only a few months before he died. His story reminds us that leadership isn't always about ambition. Sometimes, it's about sacrifice, about taking on a burden you never asked for, simply because it needs to be done. It makes you wonder about the quiet strength of those who serve, even when their hearts yearn for peace. Florines, another emperor, another short rulidos. It makes you wonder sometimes how quickly things can change. How one moment someone is at the very top, holding immense power, and the next, they're gone. We saw it happen so many times in Rome, especially in those confusing, unstable years. It's like watching a candle flicker brightly for just a second before the wind snuffs it out. After Emperor Tacitus passed away, or perhaps was even murdered, his half-brother Florianus stepped forward. He felt it was his right, his duty, to take the throne, and for a blink of an eye, he was the emperor of Rome. Imagine that feeling. The weight of the world suddenly resting on your shoulders. The cheers, the power, the belief that you are in charge now. But here's the thing about those times. The ground was always shifting. Florianus's rule lasted for what felt like a breath, just a few short months, maybe even less than 90 days. It was hardly enough time to settle in, to make real plans, to truly feel the crown on your head. Think about it like this. Have you ever been chosen for a big role in a school play, or maybe to lead a group project? And then, almost immediately, something changes. Maybe the play gets cancelled, or the project gets taken over by someone else. You barely had time to practice your lines or gather your team. That brief moment of importance, quickly gone. Florianus faced a rival, a general named Probus, who was stronger and had more support. So, Florianus's reign ended, not with a grand battle or a long struggle, but quickly, almost silently. Some say he was killed by his own soldiers who switched sides. Others say he took his own life. Either way, his time was over. It makes you think about how truly fragile life can be, doesn't it? How even the most powerful positions, like ruling an empire, can vanish in an instant. It's a quiet, almost sad reminder that no matter how important something seems, or how much control we think we have, life has a way of showing us how temporary everything truly is. Sometimes, even a brief moment on the throne can teach us about power's fleeting nature. It's not about how long we have, but what we manage to do, or even just feel and learn, with the time we are given, no matter how short. Probus, making soldiers work, getting them angry. Have you ever been asked to do something that felt totally against what you were good at, or what you believed your main purpose was? Imagine a star athlete told to spend all practice painting fences, instead of playing their sport. That's a bit like Emperor Probus and his Roman soldiers. Probus was a strong general, winning many battles, keeping the empire safe. But when peace came, he saw his huge army and thought, these men are just sitting round, they should be working. So, Probus decided his soldiers, trained for fighting, should become builders and farmers. He made them dig canals, drain swamps, plant vineyards, and build bridges. He thought this would keep them busy, make the empire richer, and even make the army more self-sufficient. It seemed like a smart idea, saving money and creating things for Rome. But here's the thing. These weren't common laborers. They were warriors. Their pride, their very identity, was tied to their swords and their ability to fight. Imagine being a brilliant musician, giving your heart to your instrument, and then told to sweep the concert hall all day. You might do it, but deep down, you'd feel confused, even insulted. You'd lose your sense of purpose. That's how many of Probus's soldiers felt. Their hands were for swords, not shovels. Their skills were for battle, not planting. This stripped away their honor, making them feel like common workers, not Rome's elite protectors. It stirred a quiet, simmering anger within them, a resentment growing with every ditch dug and vine planted. Sometimes, good intentions, if they ignore how people feel about their worth, lead to sad outcomes. When people feel their core identity and purpose are taken away, the consequences can be truly profound. Kairos, mysterious death by thunderstorm. Imagine you're at the very peak of your power, leading a mighty army, conquering new lands. You feel unstoppable, like nothing can touch you. But what if fate, or something even bigger than an emperor, decides your time is suddenly up? That's the chilling story of Emperor Kairos. He was a tough Roman general who rose to rule, pushing the empire's reach far into Persia. He seemed to have everything under control, crushing enemies and bringing home victories. He had faced countless dangers, but then, one terrifying night, everything changed. Historians tell us Kairos was camped with his army near the Tigris River, deep in enemy territory. It was late summer, the air probably thick and heavy. Suddenly, a truly violent thunderstorm erupted. The sky must have turned black, lit up by blinding flashes of lightning, followed by deafening thunderclaps that shook the ground. And in the midst of this terrifying display of nature's raw power, Kairos died. Some reports suggest he was struck by lightning, a dramatic and sudden end. Others whisper he was already very sick in his tent, or even that his own soldiers, tired and far from home, played a darker role. It's like when you're watching a huge storm, and the power suddenly goes out. 1 second, everything is bright. The next, you're plunged into darkness, wondering what happened and why. For the Romans, who truly believed gods influenced everything, a death by lightning might have seemed like a direct sign from above, a message that the gods disapproved. It makes you wonder how much control anyone truly has, even an all-powerful emperor. Here's the thing, Carus was at his most powerful, but a simple act of nature, or something more human and hidden, ended it all in an instant. It reminds us that no matter how mighty we become, life can change in a flash, leaving behind unsettling questions and a lasting sense of wonder about forces beyond our understanding. Numenorian, his body carried in secret. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to hold a secret so heavy it could break an empire? For Emperor Numenorian, his final secret was his own death, hidden away. His body carried on a journey that was supposed to bring him home. Numenorian was an emperor of Rome, a powerful leader, but his reign was short and troubled. He was on his way back from a war, riding in a covered carriage, protected from the sun because he had a bad eye infection. Or, at least, that's what everyone was told. For days, the carriage moved with the rest of the army, but the emperor never truly emerged. His chief advisor, a man named Aper, insisted Numenorian was too ill to be disturbed. But here's the problem. Secrets, especially ones this big, rarely stay hidden forever. As the journey stretched on, an awful smell began to creep from Numenorian's carriage. A smell that was impossible to ignore. It was the smell of something decaying, something dead. So, here's what happened. The soldiers, growing suspicious and uneasy, finally forced their way inside, and there he was. Numenorian, the mighty emperor, lay dead, his body already rotting. His advisor had kept his death a secret, trying to hold on to power, hoping no one would notice. It's a lot like when you leave a piece of fruit in your locker for too long. You might forget about it, or try to pretend it's not there, but eventually, the smell will give it away. The truth, like that smell, has a way of escaping, no matter how hard you try to keep it locked up. This isn't just a story about a dead emperor, it's about the weight of deception. It shows us that even in the highest places, where people fight desperately to control everything, the simplest truths cannot be contained forever. And that's why it matters. Because hiding the truth, especially something so fundamental, often causes more trouble and sadness than facing it head on. It reminds us that all lives, no matter how powerful, eventually end, and no secret can truly stop time or fate. Diocletian, splitting power, persecuting Christians. Have you ever felt like a task was just too big for one person to handle alone? Imagine trying to manage an entire continent, keep peace, and run an economy all by yourself. That's what the Roman Empire had become by the late 200s AD. Too vast, too sprawling. One emperor couldn't control it. So, a man named Diocletian came up with a bold, almost desperate, plan. He decided to share power, splitting the enormous empire into 4 sections. It was called the Tetrarchy, meaning rule of 4. 2 senior emperors, called Augusti, ruled each half, east and west. Beneath them, 2 junior emperors, Caesars, prepared to take over. This wasn't just about drawing lines on a map. It was an attempt to keep a dying world from falling apart, a radical idea born from fear. He hoped that by breaking it into smaller pieces, the whole thing might just hold together. But Diocletian's quest for order didn't stop there. He believed deeply in the ancient Roman gods and traditions, seeing them as the glue of the empire. Here's the thing. A new religion, Christianity, was spreading. Christians refused to worship Roman gods or the emperor, believing in only one god. To Diocletian, this wasn't just a different faith. It was a direct challenge to Roman identity, a threat to the stability he desperately sought. He thought if the gods weren't honored, they would abandon Rome. This fear led to a tragic chapter, a brutal persecution of Christians. He ordered their churches destroyed, their sacred texts burned. Many followers faced terrible choices. It's like if your community suddenly declared your most cherished beliefs illegal, demanding you give them up or face severe punishment. That feeling of being an outsider, of having your fundamental truth challenged by raw power, must have been terrifying. Diocletian's story is a profound reminder that even strong efforts for order can lead to deep pain. He sought to unify Rome, but his choices fractured its spirit, physically dividing it and crushing many hearts. It leaves us wondering if true strength comes from forced conformity, or from something much more understanding and patient. Maximian, the co-emperor who couldn't let go. Have you ever had something so amazing, so central to who you are, that the thought of letting it go felt impossible? Imagine a king, or in Rome's case, an emperor. For Maximian, a powerful conqueror, that feeling was very real. He shared the vast Roman Empire with Diocletian, his trusted partner. Together, they made a system where power was divided among 4 leaders, hoping to keep things stable. It was a big deal, a new way to run things. But here's the thing, Diocletian eventually decided to retire. He was tired, and he believed it was time for new blood. He even convinced Maximian to step down with him. They had a grand ceremony, both giving up their supreme power. It was a shocking moment in history, emperors actually choosing to walk away. Most rulers clung to their thrones until their last breath, so Maximian was supposed to be enjoying his retirement, living a quiet life. But the pull of the purple robe, the roar of the crowds, the sheer authority of being an emperor, it was a siren song he just couldn't ignore. Think about it like this. Imagine you're the star player on a sports team, the captain. You lead them to victory after victory. Then, you decide to retire from the team. You watch from the sidelines, and you see the new captain struggling. Or maybe you just missed the thrill, the spotlight, the feeling of making all the big decisions. That deep longing, that ache to be back in charge, is what Maximian felt. He tried, more than once, to reclaim his old title, to push his way back onto the throne. It became a sad, desperate struggle against a past he couldn't leave behind. His story reminds us how hard it is to truly let go of something that defined us. It teaches us that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in holding on, but in accepting when it's time for a new chapter, even when it hurts. Power can be a heavy crown, and sometimes the heaviest part is the invisible weight of what we can't release. Constantius I, Emperor. But not for long. Have you ever thought about how quickly things can change? One moment, you're just doing your part, working hard. The next, you're at the very top, holding immense power. And then, just as fast, it's all over. That's a bit like the story of Constantius I, a man who became Roman emperor, but only for the briefest, most fragile time. Here's the thing. The Roman Empire was huge, too big for just one person to manage. So, they tried a system where 4 men shared the power, like a team of leaders. Constantius was one of these men, a strong general who looked after the western parts. Places like Britain and France today. People respected him. He was known for being fair and not persecuting Christians, which was a big deal back then. But his journey to the highest title, Augustus, the senior emperor, was fleeting. He reached that incredible peak, the most powerful man in the West, only to hold it for about a year. Think about it this way. Imagine you've practiced for years to become the lead role in a big school play. You finally get it. You step onto the stage. The lights are on you. And just as you say your first lines, the curtain closes for good. That rush of accomplishment, that weight of expectation, it's all there, but then it's gone. That's what it must have felt like, to touch such a high point of power, only to have life cut short. He died in Britain, far from Rome, leaving his son, Constantine, to step into a world full of ambition and danger. And that's why it matters. His short reign shows us something important about power itself. It's not always about how long you hold it, but what moments you live within it. Sometimes, the briefest reign can set the stage for huge changes. Even if the person himself only got a glimpse of the crown, it leaves you wondering what more he could have done, or what burdens he was spared. Galerius, the fierce fighter who hated Christians. Have you ever wondered why some people develop such deep hatred for a group, fearing them just for being different? Imagine holding immense power and choosing to use it to erase an entire belief system. That's a little like the story of Galerius. He wasn't born into royalty, but was a tough soldier who climbed the ranks to become Roman emperor. Galerius deeply believed in ancient Roman gods and traditions, seeing them as the empire's strength. But here's the thing. He saw the growing number of Christians as a real threat. They refused to worship traditional Roman gods, following a different path. To Galerius, this felt like deep betrayal, an insult to Roman identity and loyalty. Think about a sports team. Everyone wears the same uniform, follows the same coach. A new player comes along, insisting on their own gear, their own rules. To the coach, that player might seem like they're breaking the team apart. Galerius saw Christians similarly, as people who wouldn't conform, who might weaken the empire. His fear, misunderstood and growing, slowly turned into terrible anger, and that anger led to truly dark actions. Galerius became a driving force behind what history calls the Great Persecution. This was a time when Christians faced unbelievable hardship. They were arrested, tortured, and even killed, simply for what they believed. It's hard to imagine that kind of suffering, that courage to hold on to faith against such brutal power. But then, as Galerius himself grew ill, something shifted. We can't know exactly what he felt. Perhaps regret, perhaps a dawning understanding that belief couldn't be crushed by force. And that's why it matters. He eventually issued an order, an edict, saying Christians could practice their religion again. It was a massive turn, a moment when even the fiercest hatred seemed to soften, offering a glimpse of peace. This quiet reminder from history shows us that even when people are caught in deep fear, there's always a chance for change and a hesitant peace. Severus too, trapped and killed by rivals. Have you ever felt completely trapped, caught between forces much bigger than you? Imagine being in that spot, but with an entire empire at stake. That's a bit like the sad story of Severus too. He was an emperor, yes, but not really in control. He was a piece in a dangerous game played by more powerful men. The Roman Empire was meant to be run by 4 emperors, sharing power, but this system quickly fell apart, leading to civil war. Severus II was put in charge of the Western Roman Empire, but a rival, Maxentius, rose up in Rome, backed by his powerful father Maximian. Severus II was sent to stop Maxentius. As he marched towards Rome, Maxentius and Maximian worked behind the scenes. They promised Severus's soldiers money and power if they switched sides, and that's exactly what happened. His own men deserted him, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. It's like being the captain of a team, and your players suddenly walk off the field to join the other side. You're left alone, completely exposed. Severus too was cornered near Ravenna. He had to surrender, taken prisoner. His fate was sealed by his own troops' betrayal. Not long after, he was killed, likely forced to take his own life or executed by his rivals. His story is a raw reminder. Power can be fragile. Even an emperor could be a pawn, used and discarded by those with greater ambition. It makes you wonder about the hunger for power, and the human cost when trust breaks down and people become tools in someone else's deadly game. Maxentius, the emperor who drowned in the Tiber. Have you ever thought about how quickly things can change? How one bad decision, or even just one terrible moment, can alter everything? Imagine being at the top, ruling a huge city, feeling invincible. That's a bit like Maxentius, an emperor in Rome, whose story ends in a way that feels almost like a tragic poem. He's remembered not just for his rule, but for his final, desperate moments. Maxentius was one of several powerful men, all trying to control the vast Roman Empire. He held Rome itself, and for a while, he seemed pretty secure. But another ambitious leader, Constantine, was coming for him. This wasn't just a political disagreement. It was a fight to the death for ultimate power. The weight of an empire rested on their shoulders, and you can imagine the fear, the tension in the air. So, the stage was set for a huge battle. Maxentius, instead of staying safe behind Rome's strong walls, made a risky choice. He led his army out, across the Tiber River, on a temporary bridge. Maybe he felt overconfident, or perhaps he was just desperate, feeling the immense pressure of his position. It's like when you're facing a tough challenge, and you decide to take a huge gamble, hoping it will pay off. Even if deep down you know it's incredibly risky, you can feel that churning in your stomach, that mix of fear and determination. But here's what happened. The battle went badly for Mac. His army crumbled. In the chaos, trying to escape, he found himself back at that same temporary bridge. It broke apart beneath him. Or perhaps he was simply pushed into the river. Loaded down with heavy armor, he sank beneath the murky waters of the Tiber, never to rise again. His body was found later, a drowned emperor. His story is a powerful reminder that even those who seem all-powerful can be brought down so suddenly, sometimes by the very choices they make under pressure. It tells us about the unpredictable nature of life, and how quickly fortune can turn. It also reminds us that pride or desperation can lead to moments where we find ourselves literally, or figuratively, in over our heads, struggling against currents we can't control. And that's why it matters. It makes us think about our own choices, and the delicate balance between power and vulnerability. Maximinus Dire, his cruelty and how he died. Have you ever thought about how someone with all the power in the world might choose to use it? Sometimes, people get so caught up in their own importance that they stop caring about anyone else. Maximinus Dire was an emperor like that. He was known for being incredibly cruel, not just strict, but actively enjoying the suffering of others. He especially disliked anyone who wasn't like him, particularly those who followed new religions, treating them with a harshness that scared people deeply. Imagine if someone in charge of your entire town decided they hated a certain group of people and made their lives a nightmare, just because they could. That's the kind of power he wielded. Here's the thing. Sometimes, when people feel insecure or threatened, they try to control everything around them. It's a bit like when a bully in school tries to make everyone else feel small so they can feel big. Dea, even as an emperor, seemed to operate from this place of deep insecurity. He thought that making people fear him was the same as making them respect him. But fear doesn't last, and it doesn't build anything good. He pushed away anyone who might have given him good advice, surrounding himself with people who would only tell him what he wanted to hear. So, how did this story end for Maximinus Dea? Not well, unfortunately. After losing a very important battle, his world started to crumble. He grew terribly ill, some say from a disease that racked his body with pain, maybe even from the stress and defeat. He suffered greatly, a long and painful end, his body weakening, until he finally died, alone and largely unmourned. His story tells us something important. It shows us that true strength isn't found in how much fear you can create, or how many people you can control. Real strength comes from fairness, from kindness, and from understanding that how you treat others matters more than any crown or title you might wear. Even powerful rulers eventually face the consequences of their actions, and often, the cruelest among them find the most bitter ends. Licinius, Constantine's rival. His dark end. Have you ever wondered what happens when two people, once allies, turn into bitter enemies, especially when the whole world hangs in the balance? That's the story of Licinius and Constantine. They were co-emperors, supposed to share power and rule the vast Roman Empire together. For a while, they even seemed to get along. They worked together on important things, like the Edict of Milan, which brought religious freedom to many, especially Christians. It was a huge step for peace across the empire. But here's the thing, the Roman Empire was too big for two giants. Just like when two strong magnets get close, they either snap together or push each other away with incredible force. Licinius and Constantine were like that. Each believed he was the true leader, the one meant to rule alone. Licinius started to get scared of Constantine's growing power. This fear slowly changed him. He began to see Christians, who often sided with Constantine, as a threat. He went back on the promises of the Edict of Milan, making life difficult and dangerous for Christians in his territories. It was a desperate move, driven by a deep, gnawing fear of losing everything. Imagine you and a friend are working on a big school project together. At first, you're a great team, but then, you both want to be the one who presents the final work, or get all the credit. That small feeling can grow into a huge problem, sometimes making you forget why you even started working together. For Licinius, that feeling grew into a war. The fight was brutal. Constantine won, and Licinius's story ended in defeat and execution. It's a somber reminder that even when someone wins, the path to victory can be paved with betrayal and heartbreak. It makes you think about the true cost of wanting absolute control, doesn't it? Sometimes, chasing all the power can leave you with nothing at all. Constantine the Great. Family murders and power struggles. Have you ever wondered what it's truly like to hold incredible power? The kind of power that could change the world, but also maybe change you in difficult ways. Constantine the Great is famous for many things, especially for allowing Christianity to flourish in the Roman Empire. But here's the thing about ultimate power. It often comes with a very dark side, and can demand terrible choices. Constantine faced constant threats. He had to be strong, sometimes brutally so, to keep his vast empire together. And sometimes, those threats came from very close to home. Imagine having to make life or death decisions about your own family when your entire kingdom is at stake. History tells us Constantine made some truly terrible choices. He ordered the death of his own son, Crispus. No one is totally sure why, but people whispered about plots, about Crispus perhaps becoming too popular, a threat to his father's rule. Not long after, his wife Fausta also met a tragic end. Again, the reasons are murky, but it seems she might have been involved in Crispus's downfall, or perhaps even seen as another danger to Constantine. It's hard to wrap your head around, right? A man who did so much for a new religion, also capable of such darkness within his own family. Think about a time you might have worried someone close to you was working against your best interests. That fear of betrayal, or of losing what you've worked for, it can be overwhelming. For an emperor, those feelings are multiplied 1,000,000 times. It makes you think, doesn't it, about how power, even when used for what seems good, can demand a terrible personal price, and about the deep, often painful secrets that even the greatest leaders carry. History remembers their achievements, but also the shadows they cast, reminding us that being human, with all our fears and ambitions, is always part of the story. Constantius too, his suspicion and many executions. Imagine living in a world where you couldn't truly trust anyone. Not your advisors, not your generals, maybe not even your own family. That's a bit like the burden Constantius II carried as a Roman emperor. Here's the thing. He lived with a deep, chilling suspicion that colored everything he did. He became emperor after his father, Constantine the Great, died, and many of his relatives also died mysteriously around that time. This might have planted a seed of constant fear in his heart. This isn't just a historical detail. It's about what fear can do to a person in power. Constantius II was often convinced that plots were forming against him, even when there was little evidence. He saw enemies everywhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting to seize his throne. And that's why he made some terrible choices. He ordered the arrest and execution of many people he suspected, sometimes on very weak grounds. Think of it this way. Have you ever made a small mistake, like forgetting a homework assignment, and then worried endlessly that everyone would think you're completely irresponsible? And maybe you started seeing people whisper and you thought they were talking about you, even if they weren't. Constantius II felt that kind of paranoia, but on a massive scale. His mistake was being emperor, and he feared everyone wanted to take it from him. This constant state of suspicion meant a lot of innocent people suffered. Friends, loyal servants, and even distant relatives were removed from his path, simply because he doubted them. It created an atmosphere of terror in the court, where everyone walked on eggshells. Nobody felt safe. This endless cycle of fear and punishment must have been exhausting, not just for his subjects, but for Constantius himself. It's a sad thought that a leader's own fear can lead to so much pain. Perhaps true strength comes not from eliminating all threats, but from finding a way to trust, even a little, and finding peace within that trust. Julian the Apostate, trying to bring back old gods. Have you ever felt a deep longing for something from the past, wishing you could bring it back just as it was? Imagine an entire empire, vast and powerful, that was slowly but surely changing its mind about the most important things, like who to worship. That's a bit like the world Emperor Julian lived in. Most Romans were embracing a new faith, Christianity, which was spreading quickly through the land. But Julian, who would later be called the Apostate, had a very different idea, a very different heart. Julian grew up witnessing this change, but in his mind, he believed the old gods, the ancient deities of Roman Greece, held the true wisdom. These were the gods of the sun, the sky, the harvest, Jupiter, Apollo, Minerva, figures from stories that had shaped Roman culture for 1,000 years. When he became emperor, Julian didn't just want to tolerate these old ways. He felt a powerful pull to restore them to their former glory, to make them the heart of Roman life once more. It was like trying to turn a powerful river back upstream, asking everyone to remember and love something that, for many, had already faded into history. It's a bit like when a new invention, say smartphones, completely takes over. Everyone uses them, they become a part of daily life. Then, imagine someone in charge suddenly trying to make everyone go back to using only old rotary phones, insisting they are better and more traditional, even beautiful. It would feel strange, right? Many would resist, because progress and new beliefs had already taken root. Julian's project was so much bigger, so much more personal. He poured his whole soul into reviving the old temples, the old rituals, hoping to reawaken a sense of wonder and connection that he deeply felt was lost. This yearning to hold on to a fading past, to fight against the current of history, is a heavy burden to carry. Julian's story shows us the quiet strength, and perhaps the deep loneliness, of trying to reignite a flame that much of the world has already moved beyond. It makes you wonder about the power of belief, and how sometimes, even the most determined heart cannot turn the tide of time. Jovian, a bad peace deal, and a short life. Have you ever faced a choice where every option felt terrible? Imagine that feeling, but multiplied by the fate of an entire army and empire. That's where Emperor Jovian found himself. After Julian the Apostate died in battle, the Roman army was stuck deep in enemy territory, far from home, surrounded by Persians, and running out of food and water. It was a terrifying, desperate time. So here's what happened. Jovian, a general, was chosen as the new emperor. His first task was to save the army. He faced an impossible decision. He could try to fight their way out, which likely meant almost everyone would die. Or he could make a deal. He chose the deal, but it came at a truly heavy price. Jovian agreed to give up large parts of Roman land in Mesopotamia, including important fortresses like Nisibis, which had been Roman for a long time. This wasn't just land. It was a piece of Rome's pride, a deep cut to its power. It was humiliating, a peace treaty born of pure desperation. Think about it like this. Imagine you've been working really hard on a team project, and something goes wrong, and you're forced to give up the best parts of your work just to get a passing grade. Even though it feels like a total defeat, you're safe, but it still stings. That's the kind of feeling this peace deal left in Roman hearts. Jovian didn't live with his choice for long. He died very suddenly on the journey back to Constantinople, just a few months after becoming emperor. Was it natural causes, maybe brought on by the immense stress, or was there something darker at play? We don't know for sure, but here's the thing. His short life and that difficult decision remind us how heavy the crown could be. Sometimes, leaders have to make choices that feel like losing, even if they save lives, and those scars can stay with an empire, and with history, for a very long time. It shows that even a win can feel like a profound loss. Valentinian, a ruler with a terrible temper. Have you ever felt your own temper flare up? That rush of heat when you were really upset? Now, imagine if you were an emperor, ruling over vast lands, and that same burning anger was part of your daily life. Valentinian I was one of Rome's most powerful leaders, a strong soldier who guarded the empire's borders. But here's the thing, he was also known for having a truly terrible temper. His rage was legendary, like a storm cloud always ready to burst. In his world, an emperor's word was law. This meant his moods could literally decide life or death. Think about it, when someone with all that power can't control their own emotions, it creates a terrifying environment for everyone around them. It's a bit like a huge, powerful engine that doesn't have good brakes. It can do amazing things, but without control, it's incredibly dangerous. For Valentinian, his anger wasn't just a private feeling. It spilled out, affecting his entire court. He was known to explode in fury over small things, shouting at officials, making people tremble with fear. His courts weren't places of calm discussion, but often stages for his sudden emotional outbursts. People walked on eggshells, terrified of sparking his next fit of rage. And here's what happened. His temper didn't just hurt others, it ultimately hurt him. In a final desperate moment of pure fury, while yelling at some barbarian envoys who he felt had disrespected him, Valentinian suffered a stroke. His anger literally consumed him, ending his life. It's a harsh reminder that true power isn't just about what you can command others to do. It's also about the quiet strength to command yourself, to guide your own emotions. Even for an emperor, mastering the storm within can be the greatest challenge of all. And perhaps, the most important lesson. Valens, his bad choices led to disaster. Have you ever thought about how one person's decisions can change everything? Not just for them, but for many others. Imagine being in charge of an entire empire. That's immense pressure. And for Emperor Valens, his choices led to a truly devastating end for Rome, and for himself. Here's what happened. A group of people called the Goths, driven from their homes by fierce invaders, sought safety within the Roman Empire. Valens made a huge decision. He said yes. He let them cross the Danube River, promising them land and food. It sounds like a good plan, right? Offer help, gain new citizens. But here's the problem. Valens and his officials treated the Goths terribly. They cheated them out of food, charged unfair prices, and made their lives miserable. This wasn't just poor management, it was cruel. Think about it like this. Imagine you're doing a big group project for school. Your leader promises fair tasks, but then, they give you the worst jobs, take credit, and don't listen. How would you feel? Angry, right? You'd stop wanting to cooperate. That's what happened with the Goths. Their desperation turned into fury. So, the Goths, meant to be Rome's allies, rose in rebellion. Valens, instead of trying to fix things, decided to crush them with military force. This led to the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD, one of Rome's most terrible defeats. Valens himself was killed, and much of the Roman army was destroyed. It wasn't just a battle lost, it was a loss of trust, of lives, and a painful lesson, and that's why it matters. This story shows us the heavy weight of leadership. When kindness is replaced by greed, and wisdom by stubborn pride, the results can be truly tragic, affecting generations. It reminds us that even in powerful positions, our choices echo through time, shaping destinies far beyond our own. Gratian, hunting animals, ignoring the empire. Have you ever had a really big responsibility, like a major group project, or being captain of a team? Imagine that, but 1,000 times bigger. What if you were in charge of an entire empire, a vast collection of lands and people, with huge problems needing your attention? And what if, instead of dealing with those problems, you just wanted to go hunting? That's a bit like the story of Gratian, a Roman emperor who lived a long, long time ago. He became emperor when he was quite young. You'd think leading Rome would be an all-consuming job, full of meetings, tough decisions, and constant worry about enemies. And it was, but Gratian found his real joy elsewhere. He loved hunting, not just a little bit, but so much that it seemed to be his main focus. He spent his days chasing wild animals, even training Huns, a group famous for their fierce warriors, to hunt alongside him. While Gratian was out enjoying the thrill of the chase, the Roman Empire was slowly, painfully, falling apart. Here's the thing, leaders have to make hard choices. They need to protect their people and keep things running smoothly. Think about your school principal. They can't just spend all day playing video games, even if they wanted to, right? They have a job to do, making sure the school is safe and everyone is learning. If they ignored their duties, things would quickly become messy and unsafe. Gracian's story makes us think about what it truly means to be in charge. Is it just about having power, or is it about the heavy weight of duty that comes with it? He might have found happiness in his hunts, but his choices left his empire vulnerable, and his people scared. It's a quiet reminder that what we choose to focus on, and what we choose to ignore, can have huge, lasting effects, far beyond our own lives. Sometimes, the most important thing isn't what makes us happy in the moment, but what serves the greater good. Magnus Maximus, a usurper who caused trouble. Have you ever felt that burning desire for something, wanting it so badly you might stretch the rules a little? Or maybe you've seen someone else try to take charge of a situation where they really weren't supposed to. It can feel messy, right? Now, imagine that kind of ambition, but on the grand stage of an entire empire. That's a bit like the dramatic story of Magnus Maximus. He was a Roman general, a strong leader in charge of the legions in faraway Britain. But he didn't stop there. He decided, boldly, to declare himself emperor, even though he had no rightful claim to the purple robes of Rome. To be a usurper meant to seize power illegally. It was a move that shook the very foundations of the Roman world. Think of it like a game of Jenga. Every block has its place, holding the tower steady. But if someone suddenly yanks out a critical block, not because it's their turn or part of the rules, but just because they want to control the game, the whole structure becomes wobbly, ready to crash. Magnus Maximus's grab for power was a Jenga block pulled from the heart of the empire. His ambition wasn't just a personal drama, it sent a wave of chaos across the Roman lands. He marched his army from Britain, pulling vital troops away from their posts, defending against barbarians. This forced the legitimate emperor Gratian to fight him. This wasn't a quick duel. It ignited civil wars. Innocent people suffered. Cities were torn apart, and the empire, already facing so many threats, was deeply weakened from within. The strength and unity it desperately needed was shattered by one man's hunger for the throne. It's a powerful reminder that choices, especially those driven by raw ambition, have deep, lasting effects. When someone reaches for power without truly earning it, or by stepping over others, the cost is often paid by many. It makes us wonder about what true leadership really means. Is it about taking control for oneself, or is it about the hard work of serving and protecting the peace for everyone? Theodosius I, the massacre at Thessaloniki. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone incredibly powerful lets their anger completely take over? It's a scary thought, right? Well, imagine Emperor Theodosius I, a man who ruled the mighty Roman Empire. He was a deeply religious man in many ways, but like all humans, he had flaws. And one day, his anger led to a terrible, heartbreaking event known as the Massacre at Thessaloniki. Here's what happened. In the city of Thessaloniki, a Roman general was killed during a riot. Theodosius was furious. He felt his authority challenged, so he planned a terrible revenge. He invited the citizens to chariot races, promising a grand spectacle. People came, excited for the show, not knowing what awaited them. And then, it happened. Once the stadium was full, the gates were sealed. The emperor's soldiers, who were waiting, moved in. They attacked the innocent crowd. Men, women, children, thousands of people were killed, just to punish a whole city for the actions of a few. It was a brutal, unforgivable act of rage. Think about it this way. It's like when a small argument with a friend suddenly explodes because one person lets frustration blind them, and they say or do something hurtful they can't take back. But here, the consequences were on an impossible scale. This wasn't just harsh words, it was widespread death ordered by one man. Theodosius, in his fury, lost sight of justice and humanity. The memory of Thessaloniki stands as a stark reminder. It teaches us that true power isn't just about giving orders. It's about having the wisdom to use that power with kindness and restraint. Even emperors, with all their might, had to face the heavy weight of their choices. And sometimes, those choices left scars that never truly healed. It makes you wonder what kind of emperor he truly was. Beneath the grand titles, Honorius losing Rome cared more for chickens ***. Honorius losing Rome cared more for chickens ***. Imagine you're in charge of something huge, your whole town, or even a country. What would be the very last thing you'd want to lose? For the Roman Emperor Honorius, during one of Rome's darkest moments, his answer wasn't the empire itself. That's a truly strange thing to think about. Honorius was emperor in the early 400s AD. The mighty Roman Empire was cracking under pressure from invaders, especially the Visigoths. These fierce warriors were knocking on Rome's gates, but Honorius didn't focus on defense or leading armies. He was obsessed with his pet chickens. Yes, chickens. He had a favorite hen, named Roma. So, when news reached him that the Visigoths had broken through and the city of Rome had fallen, his first reaction was unexpected. His attendants came, breathless, saying, "Rome has perished." Honorius, distressed, cried, "But she only just ate from my hand." He meant his hen. They had to clarify it was the city, not his beloved bird, that was lost. It's like a coach in a championship game. The team is losing badly, the clock is ticking, but the coach is on the sideline, more worried about a loose shoelace than helping players win. Sounds crazy, right? Honorius's reaction tells us something deep about how people cope, or don't cope, with huge problems. It shows how we might focus on small, comforting things when big, terrifying realities are too much. When the world feels like it's falling apart, we sometimes cling to what feels safe, even a chicken. It's a sad thought. A leader facing an empire's collapse found more comfort in one bird than in millions of people. What we truly care about, especially in chaos, can show so much about us. Arcadius, weak emperor, strong wife behind him. Have you ever wondered who truly holds the reins of power? Sometimes, the person wearing the crown isn't the one really in charge. That was the story of Arcadius, the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire. He inherited a vast empire, stretching from Greece to Egypt, but he wasn't quite built for the job. Arcadius was a quiet man, easily swayed, and often seemed lost in the shadows of his own court. He was emperor, yes, but he rarely acted like it. But here's the thing. Behind this quiet, somewhat weak emperor, there was a force that truly shaped the empire. His wife, she wasn't just a pretty face in the palace. She was smart, ambitious, and knew exactly how to make things happen. While Arcadius might have been signing decrees, Eudoxia was often the one whispering in his ear, pushing for policies, and even fighting powerful church leaders. She understood the power of influence, how to guide events without always being the one officially leading. Think about a school project. You might have one person whose name is listed first on the report, the leader in name, but often there's another student, maybe quieter, who did all the research, organized the group, and really made sure the project was a success. That person, the one working behind the scenes, is like Eudoxia. They don't need the spotlight to have immense control. It makes you think about strength, doesn't it? We often picture strength as loud, visible, and commanding, but sometimes the deepest power is found in those who quietly guide, who understand how to move the pieces on the board without ever showing their hand. Eudoxia's story reminds us that true leadership isn't always about the title you hold. It's about the impact you make, sometimes from the most unexpected places. And that's a truth that echoes even today. Stilicho, the general betrayed by his own side. Have you ever worked so hard, given everything you had to protect something important, only to have the very people you were fighting for turn against you? It's a gut-wrenching feeling, right? That's the heavy story of Stilicho, a general who gave his life trying to save the Western Roman Empire, but was ultimately betrayed by his own side. Stilicho wasn't even fully Roman by birth. He was a Vandal, which was a group many Romans called barbarians, but he grew up in the Roman military, served with amazing loyalty, and became the most powerful general of his time. He was brilliant, a true hero who managed to beat back wave after wave of invaders like the Visigoths, keeping Rome safe when it was weakening. He was like the star player on a failing team, carrying everyone on his back. He pushed back armies that threatened to burn Rome to the ground, securing victories that bought the empire precious time. But here's the thing, because he was an outsider, some powerful Roman figures always looked at him with suspicion. They were jealous of his power, afraid of his influence, and they whispered doubts about his loyalty to the young emperor. It's like being the best player on your basketball team, always scoring, always defending. But because you moved from a different town, some teammates might spread rumors, saying you're only out for yourself, even when you're clearly winning games for everyone. Eventually, the coach, influenced by these whispers and his own fear, might bench you, not because you're playing badly, but because of the unfair, untrue stories. That's what happened to the emperor, young and easily swayed by those around him, began to believe the lies. He saw Stilicho not as a protector, but as a threat. And so, the general who had saved Rome countless times was arrested, then executed, on false charges of treason. It's a deeply sad moment in history, showing how fear and prejudice can blind people, leading them to destroy their greatest defenders from within. It makes you wonder how often fear, rather than real danger, can cause the most terrible losses. Galla Placidia, a powerful woman in a falling empire. Can you imagine what it feels like to hold immense power, yet watch everything you know and love slowly, painfully crumble around you? That was the haunting reality for Galla Placidia, a remarkable woman in ancient Rome. She wasn't an emperor herself, but her life was deeply tied to the throne, daughter, sister, wife, and mother to men who wore the purple robes of Rome. She lived through truly desperate times. The Roman Empire, once a symbol of unbreakable strength, was truly on its knees. Invaders pushed from every side. Cities that had stood for centuries were falling, and the very idea of Rome's eternal glory was fading away, replaced by fear and uncertainty. It was a terrifying, heartbreaking period. Here's the thing. Galla Placidia endured incredible hardship and made impossible choices. She was kidnapped by Visigoths, married to their king, then widowed and returned to a Roman court full of plots. Later, she became regent, ruling the Western Roman Empire for her young son. Imagine that weight, a woman, in a world often run by men, trying to steer a colossal ship that was already taking on water, trying to keep its precious cargo, the idea of Rome itself, from sinking entirely. Her decisions shaped the destiny of an empire. It's a bit like being the only one trying to hold back a rising tide with just your hands, knowing deep down that the ocean is too big, too powerful. You keep building walls, digging channels, but the water just keeps coming. Yet, you don't stop trying. You do it because you must. Her dark secret wasn't a hidden crime. It was perhaps the profound, silent burden of knowing the inevitable, yet fighting with every fiber of her being. It was the heavy cost of leadership in an era of decline. Galla Placidia's story makes you wonder about the deep courage it takes to stand firm, to lead with a quiet determination, even when the world around you is falling apart. She showed us that true power isn't just about winning, but about enduring, about holding on to hope and duty, even when the future looks dim. And that's why her legacy matters so much. Valentinian III, the emperor who killed his best general. Have you ever seen someone so afraid of losing power that they hurt the very person who helps them most? It's a sad story, and it happened in ancient Rome with Emperor Valentinian III. Here's the thing. Valentinian wasn't a strong leader. He was the emperor, but he relied heavily on a brilliant general named Itius. Itius was truly amazing. He held the Western Roman Empire together during its toughest times. Think of him as the star player on a struggling team, scoring all the points, making all the saves. He even stopped Attila the Hun, one of history's most feared invaders, from destroying Rome. Itius was the protector, the shield. The people loved him, and even other kingdoms respected him. But Valentinian grew incredibly jealous. He saw Itius's power and popularity, and felt his own authority slipping away. It's like when someone in your friend group is really good at something, and everyone looks up to them, but another friend feels small or less important because of it. Instead of working together, that envy can grow into something really dark. Valentinian believed Itius was a threat to his throne, even though Itius had always been loyal. So, one day, in a moment fueled by deep fear and insecurity, Valentinian did something truly shocking. He killed Itius himself, right there in the palace. He plunged a dagger into the man who had been Rome's greatest defender. Just like that, the empire lost its best hope. A key piece of the puzzle was gone. And what happened next? Without Itius, the Western Roman Empire rapidly fell apart. It was like taking the strongest support beam out of a wobbly house. The empire, already weak, crumbled much faster. This shows us how destructive jealousy and fear can be, especially when someone has power. Sometimes, the greatest damage we do comes from inside, when we let insecurities override reason and gratitude. It's a heavy reminder that true strength isn't just about power, but also about trust and honoring those who truly stand with you. Avitus, from poet to emperor. Then exile. Have you ever been pushed into something you weren't quite ready for, something much bigger than you imagined? That's a bit like what happened to Avitus. He wasn't a famous general, not a fierce warrior. Here's the thing. Avitus was more of a scholar, a man who loved words and poetry. He came from a powerful family in Gaul, a Roman province, and served as a loyal official. He probably enjoyed his life, filled with books and quiet leadership, but the Roman Empire was falling apart, and chaos ruled. In 455 CE, after a devastating attack on Rome, a strong Vandal king named Gazaric had left the city in ruins. The Western Roman Empire needed a leader fast. Powerful figures outside of Rome, mainly Visigothic kings, saw Avitus as someone they could work with. They basically said, "Hey, you're in charge now." So, this poet, this man of peace, suddenly found himself wearing the purple robes of an emperor. Imagine being chosen to lead a huge school project, but it's for an entire city, and everyone is already upset and distrustful. You didn't ask for the job, and you're not sure how to fix everything. Avitus tried his best, but the people in Rome, especially the powerful senators, didn't really see him as one of them. He wasn't Italian, and he came to power with the help of foreign kings, not the traditional Roman way. He struggled to pay his soldiers, and Rome was still a mess. It was like he was trying to paddle a broken boat against a massive storm. Just over a year later, a powerful Roman general named Ricimer decided Avitus wasn't working out. Ricimer defeated Avitus's army, stripped him of his power, and exiled him. Avitus, the reluctant emperor, was made a bishop, then died soon after, likely by force. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the biggest titles come with the heaviest burdens. Being given power doesn't always mean it's yours to keep, or that it will bring happiness. True strength isn't just about the crown you wear, but whether that crown truly fits your head and heart. Majorian, the last hope, then betrayed. Have you ever felt like you were the only one trying to fix something big, something that everyone else had given up on? That's kind of how it was for He lived at a time when the Western Roman Empire was basically falling apart. Imagine your favorite sports team, year after year, losing every game, losing key players, and the coach just looks defeated. The empire was like that, but way worse. Majorian stepped up in the year 457. He saw the chaos, the lands taken by invaders, the corruption inside Rome itself. He wasn't some weak emperor just sitting around. He was a general, a real fighter. He believed he could make things right again. He started by trying to bring back justice, fix the economy, and even build a new fleet to fight back against the Vandals who were attacking from the sea. He had a plan, and for a little while, he gave people hope. They saw him as a light in the deep darkness, someone who truly cared about Rome's future. But here's the thing about hope. It can be fragile, especially when there are powerful people who don't want things to change. Majorian's biggest enemy wasn't an external invader. It was a man named Ricimer, a powerful Roman general who pulled a lot of strings behind the scenes. Ricimer didn't like that Majorian was actually trying to rule, trying to reform things. He preferred emperors he could control. It's like when you're working really hard on a group project, doing all the research, putting in extra hours, and then one of your teammates, who's supposed to be helping, secretly tries to mess it up because they want the credit, or they just don't like how you're doing things. That's what Ricimer did. While Majorian was busy fighting wars and trying to save the empire, Ricimer plotted against him. In 461, after just 4 years, Ricimer arrested Majorian, forced him to give up his power, and then had him executed. It's a sad story, isn't it? A man with good intentions, who genuinely wanted to save something he loved, was stopped, not by outside enemies, but by the jealousy and greed of someone within his own ranks. It makes you think about how easily a great effort can be undone, not always by grand battles, but by quiet whispers and betrayals from those closest to you. Sometimes, the biggest threats come from within, and that can break even the strongest hope. Libius Severus, a puppet emperor, no real power. What does it truly mean to be an emperor? Is it the grand crown, the flowing robes, the fancy title everyone bows to? Or is it the ability to make real decisions, to truly lead and shape the world around you? For Libius Severus, it was mostly just the first part. He was an emperor, yes, but imagine he was like the main actor in a play, and someone unseen was telling him every line, every move. He wore Rome's grand costume, but the real director, a powerful general named Ricimer, decided everything. Ricimer didn't want a strong emperor. He wanted someone easy to control, who wouldn't get in his way. Libius Severus was chosen for his weakness. He was placed on the throne, but his time as emperor felt like a long, thin shadow. It was there, visible, but had no real substance. He couldn't command armies, couldn't create laws, couldn't protect Rome from invaders. His hands were tied, even with the ring of power. He was a face, a symbol, nothing more. Here's the thing. Think about when you're playing a video game, and one of you holds an unplugged controller. You're pretending to play, hitting buttons, but the other person is actually doing all the work. That's how it felt for Libius Severus. He had the title, but no real control. His life must have been heavy with this quiet, unspoken truth. To carry the weight of an empire's name, yet feel completely helpless. It's a lonely, frustrating feeling, knowing your grand role is just an act. What is the true point of a crown if it brings no freedom, no purpose, no chance to make things better? His story reminds us that real power isn't just about the title. It's about what you do with that position, the real actions you take. Sometimes, the deepest strength comes not from a throne, but from within, in choosing what you stand for, even when the world expects you to just be a puppet. Antimeus, his crazy ideas and fall from grace. Have you ever wondered what happens when a leader, someone in charge, seems to live in their own world, seeing things differently than everyone else? That's a bit like the story of Antimeus, an emperor of the Western Roman Empire. Imagine trying to lead a whole empire when people just don't get your vision. Or worse, think you're a little odd. Antimeus wasn't just another emperor. He was known for some truly unique, even bizarre, ideas. He reportedly believed in magic and ancient rituals that most people found strange or even scary. He might have been brilliant, a thinker ahead of his time, but his mind often wandered to things others couldn't grasp. The empire he led was already crumbling. People were scared. They needed strong, practical leadership, someone to make sense of a confusing, dangerous world. Instead, they got an emperor who seemed more interested in ancient prophecies and odd practices. Think of it like this. Imagine your school's principal suddenly starts trying to run things by reading tea leaves or consulting an ancient, forgotten book of rules that no one else understands. They might have good intentions, or even a deep reason for it. But for most students and teachers, it would just feel confusing and maybe a little scary. You'd lose trust, wouldn't you? You'd wonder if they really understood the problems you faced every day. That's how many Romans felt about Antimeus. His strange beliefs made him seem distant, not connected to his people's struggles. He found himself isolated, doubted by those around him, even his own generals. He tried to hold on to power, but the disconnect was simply too great. In the end, his reign was short and ended sadly. He was overthrown and killed. His story is a quiet reminder that even powerful leaders, with unique minds, can be lost if they can't truly connect with the people they guide. It makes you think about how vital understanding and connection truly are. Even when someone means well, if their message is too far from what others can hear, they might just drift away, forgotten. Olybrius, emperor for a moment, then gone. Have you ever felt like a moment passed so quickly, you almost missed it entirely? Like a flash of lightning that lights up the sky, then vanishes. It's a strange, almost lonely feeling when something important, something you thought was real, turns out to be incredibly brief. Now, imagine that feeling, But instead of a small personal moment, it's the ultimate power, the leadership of the Roman Empire. That's a bit like the sad story of Alibri. He became an emperor of the Western Roman Empire during a truly desperate time, when everything was breaking apart, crumbling like an ancient, forgotten wall. He didn't rise to power through strength or popular vote. Instead, a powerful Gothic general named Ricimer, who was truly pulling all the strings in Rome, put Olybrius on the throne. So, Olybrius wore the deep purple robes, a symbol of immense power. But the crown must have felt incredibly heavy, and perhaps terribly hollow. He was emperor for just a few short months, from April to November of the year 472. Barely enough time to whisper a few commands, barely enough time to even truly understand the weight of ruling such a vast, broken land. Think of it like getting the main part in a school play, but the show only runs for one night, and someone else secretly wrote all your lines. Or like captaining a huge, beautiful ship, but then realizing it's already sinking, and someone else is steering from below. Just as this crushing reality settles in, your time is suddenly up. Olybrius died, some say from a sudden illness, others whisper of a darker end. Only a short while after taking the grand title, his brief, sad reign reminds us that even the highest positions can sometimes be empty, and power, no matter how grand, can vanish like morning mist. It teaches us that true impact isn't always tied to a fancy title, and sometimes, even a crown isn't enough to change a world already lost. Lysias, an emperor who became a bishop. Have you ever thought about how different your life might be if you suddenly had to change everything? What if you were on one path, feeling important, and then, in a blink, you were on a completely different one? This is a bit like the story of Glycerius, a man who once wore the purple robes of a Roman emperor. Glycerius was not one of those famous, powerful emperors. His reign was short, lasting just over a year in the late 400s AD. Imagine being picked for the biggest job in the world, leading an entire empire, only to have that power taken away almost as quickly as it was given. He didn't lose his life, which was often the fate of failed emperors, but he lost everything else. His position, his status, his future as a ruler, all gone. Here's the thing about life. Sometimes, when one door closes, another, completely unexpected, opens. After being removed from power by a powerful general, Glycerius didn't just disappear. Instead, he made an astonishing shift. He became a bishop. From leading an empire with armies and laws, he moved to leading a church, focusing on faith and people's spiritual needs. Think about this. Imagine being the star player on a major sports team, the captain even. Then, suddenly, you're no longer playing. But instead of giving up, you decide to coach a small, local team, helping younger kids find their own way. Your role changes entirely. You're still a leader, but in a totally different, perhaps more personal, way. The Roman Empire was crumbling around Glycerius's time. Power was a fragile thing, often given and taken by force. For him, the loss of imperial power wasn't a death sentence, but a profound transformation. He went from a world of political struggles and military might to a world of spiritual guidance and quiet service. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, if a person can find new meaning and purpose after losing everything that defined them. Sometimes, the biggest changes in our lives aren't about losing, but about finding a new path, a different kind of strength, in the most surprising places. Julius Nepos, the last legitimate Western emperor. Have you ever thought about what it feels like to be the very last of something important? Like the final note in a long song, or the very last day of summer vacation? That's a little like Julius Nepos. He was technically the last legitimate Western Roman emperor. Think about it. An empire that had lasted for hundreds of years, covering so much of the world, was quietly coming to an end with him. It wasn't a huge crash, but like a flickering candle finally going out. The Western Roman Empire was very weak when Nepos took power. It was like an old building with cracks everywhere, about to fall apart. Powerful warlords truly held the reins. Nepos was recognized by the Eastern Roman Emperor, making him legitimate, but he had little real control. He was emperor in name, not truly in charge. He was soon forced out of Rome, living his final days far from the imperial city, while another, Romulus Augustus, briefly held the throne before the Western Empire's actual end. It's kind of like being the captain of a sports team with a great history. But by your time, the team is losing every game. You have the title, but you can't stop the inevitable end. You're just there for those final, tough moments. That must feel incredibly heavy. Julius Nepo's story isn't about grand battles or dramatic betrayals. Instead, it's a quiet, sad reflection on the very end of an era. His life shows us that sometimes the biggest historical events don't end with a bang, but with a quiet sigh. He wasn't forgotten for being famous, but perhaps for being the last echo of something truly magnificent fading away. His name, though often overlooked, carries a deep, quiet weight. It reminds us that even the mightiest things can have a gentle, sorrowful end. Romulus, Augustus, the boy who lost an empire. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be caught in something much bigger than yourself? Something that feels out of your control. Imagine being a young person, maybe not much older than you are now, and suddenly the weight of an entire world, a massive empire, rests squarely on your shoulders. This is the story of Romulus Augustulus, a boy who became the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire. He was barely 16 years old when he was given this grand, yet impossible title. But here's the thing about his rule. It wasn't really a rule at all. By the time Romulus came along, the mighty Roman Empire in the West was already like an ancient tree, its roots withered, its branches cracking under their own weight. He was just a final leaf clinging to a dying branch, a symbol of an ending that was already unfolding. He didn't cause the collapse. He simply stood at the very end of it. It's hard to imagine the fear, the confusion, or perhaps even the quiet resignation he must have felt. Think about a school project, a huge group effort that's been going wrong for weeks, full of missed deadlines and bad choices from earlier team members. Then, you join the group at the very last minute, maybe just to help finish up, and suddenly, the whole project fails. Who gets remembered as part of that failure? Often, it's the person who was there at the very end, even if they weren't responsible for the earlier mistakes. That's a bit like Romulus. He sat on the throne, wore the emperor's purple, but had no real power. A German general simply took his crown, and just like that, the Western Roman Empire, which had shaped the world for over 1,000 years, simply stopped. It makes you think about fate, doesn't it? About how sometimes big historical moments are less about one powerful person's choices and more about long currents that finally reach their shore. Romulus Augustulus didn't truly lose an empire. He just happened to be the boy holding the banner when it finally fell. His story is a quiet, sad echo, reminding us that even the grandest stories have an end. And sometimes, the final act is played by a very young, very unprepared hand. Zeno, his tricky reign and usurpers. Have you ever felt like you couldn't quite relax, even when you were supposed to be in charge? Like someone was always waiting to take your spot? That's a bit how it felt for Emperor Zeno. He ruled the Eastern Roman Empire, a huge and powerful place. But here's the thing. His time on the throne was anything but peaceful. Imagine being given a really important job, the biggest one there is, but then, almost immediately, people start trying to steal it from you. Not just challenge you, but literally, try to take your crown and call themselves emperor. These people were called usurpers. They weren't elected or next in line. They just decided they wanted power, often gathering an army to try and grab it. Zeno faced this many times. Think about his brother-in-law. He actually managed to kick Zeno out for a while. It's like someone in your own family trying to take over your home, forcing you out. Zeno fought hard and got his empire back. But even after he returned, the threats didn't truly go away. It's hard to build anything lasting when you're always looking over your shoulder, wondering who will betray you next. This constant battle for power must have been an exhausting, heavy weight on his soul. Can you imagine the stress, the fear of losing everything he'd fought for, not just for himself, but for his entire empire? It shows us something important. Having power doesn't always mean having peace. Sometimes, the higher you climb, the more unstable the ground beneath you becomes. And that's why it matters. Even emperors, with all their might, wrestled with deep loneliness and terror. True leadership isn't just about holding a position, but enduring the struggle to keep it, sometimes against your very own. Anastasius I. His tax reforms made many angry. Have you ever felt truly helpless when rules about money suddenly changed? Emperor Anastasius I faced this. His Roman Empire's finances were a disaster. He tried to fix things with big tax reforms, but these changes, meant for order, caused deep anger and pain for countless people. Here's the thing. Anastasius did make the tax system fairer in one way. He removed the hated chrysageron, a heavy tax on merchants and the poor. This made many happy, yet, to strengthen the empire's finances, he became incredibly strict about collecting all other taxes. He demanded everyone pay exactly what they owed, with no exceptions or understanding for personal hardship. Imagine your family's budget shrinking due to a new mandatory fee. For some, it might be a small annoyance, but for a family struggling to buy food, that extra payment felt like a heavy stone, crushing their last bit of hope. It was a cold rule, uncaring of their daily fight to survive, and that's why it matters. Even when a leader tries to do good, changing how people earn and keep their money feels intensely personal. People felt the sting of injustice. They feared having less for their children, less for their future. It made them feel powerless, watching their hard work disappear. So, Anastasius made the empire stronger financially, but his focus overlooked the real, painful human cost. This shows how tough it is for leaders to balance empire needs with citizen struggles. Progress, sometimes, brings unexpected pain and lasting bitterness. Justin I, rising from humble beginnings, through dark deals. Have you ever wondered what it takes to climb to the very top when you start with absolutely nothing? Imagine being born into a life of hardship, a shepherd in a small village, far from the glittering palaces of power. That was Justin I. His early life was about survival, about cold nights and simple days, not about ruling an empire, but a hunger for something more. A deep desire to escape his fate began to stir within him. Here's the thing about ambition in a world as tough as ancient Rome. It often demanded more than just hard work. Justin was smart and strong, but he also had to navigate shadows and secrets. Moving from a soldier to a leader, then higher still, meant making connections, forming alliances, and making very difficult choices. Think of it like a complicated chess game, where every move affects real lives. To gain power, people often promised favors, looked the other way, or made deals that felt a little wrong. These weren't always evil acts, but they were dark compromises, secrets kept close for survival and advancement. It's like when you're part of a group project at school, and you really want a good grade. You might work with someone you don't fully trust, or agree to do something you're not thrilled about, just to make sure the project succeeds. You make those choices because the end result seems so important. For Justin, his life was the project, and ultimate power was the grade. He saw his chance, and he took it, knowing the path would be messy. And so, Justin I, the shepherd boy, became emperor. But what does it cost a soul to rise so high by walking through those shadows? Does the crown feel heavy with the weight of every difficult choice, every whispered promise, every dark deal made along the way? It reminds us that every path to power, no matter how bright the outcome, often leaves behind a trail of quiet questions, shaping the person who finally stands at the top. Justinian I, the Nicer riots, and Empress Theodora's fury. Have you ever felt so overwhelmed by a problem that you just wanted to give up and escape? Imagine that feeling, but multiplied by thousands, in the middle of a burning city. That's a bit like what happened to Emperor Justinian I during the terrifying Nicer riots. This wasn't just a tough day. It was a moment when his entire empire almost collapsed, all because of something that started with sports fans. Back then, in Constantinople, chariot races were a huge deal. People weren't just cheering for their teams. They belonged to powerful groups called the Blues and the Greens. These weren't just fan clubs. They were like supercharged political factions. Think about how much energy students put into their favorite sports teams or school clubs. But imagine that passion growing so intense it could spark a citywide revolt. When the emperor made some decisions that angered both groups, their frustrations exploded. The streets filled with angry crowds, chanting Nicer, meaning victory, and turning the city into a fiery battlefield. Buildings burned, and panic spread like wildfire. Justinian, seeing his capital consumed by violence, felt his grip on power slipping away. He was ready to flee, to abandon everything he'd built. But here's the thing, his wife, Empress Theodora, refused to let him. Can you picture the scene? The emperor, defeated, making plans to run. And then, Theodora, a woman who had come from very humble beginnings, stood tall. Her voice, calm yet powerful amidst the chaos, delivered a speech that would change history. She told them plainly, if you wish to flee, Emperor, do so, but I will stay. I would rather die as an empress than live as a fugitive. It was a moment of raw, deep emotional courage. Her words were like a jolt of electricity, reminding everyone that sometimes, even when everything feels lost, you must stand your ground. Her brave stand wasn't just inspiring, it saved the empire. Justinian, shamed and re-energized by her resolve, stayed and fought back. The riots were crushed. Theodora's unwavering spirit shows us something important. True strength isn't always about winning a battle with a sword. Sometimes it's about finding that deep courage inside you, that voice that refuses to give up, even when the world around you is burning. It teaches us that one person's refusal to surrender can turn absolute despair into a new chance. Justinian I, his generals did the work. He took the credit. Have you ever wondered who truly deserves the applause when something amazing happens? When a huge victory or accomplishment occurs, one name often shines brightest. Right, Emperor Justinian. I was one of those names. He ruled the powerful Byzantine Empire, a continuation of old Rome. During his reign, incredible things were achieved. His dream was to bring back the glory of the Roman Empire, to reclaim lost lands, and for a while it seemed he had succeeded. But here's the thing. While Justinian sat in his palace, planning and strategizing, the real battles, the muddy, bloody fights, were won by others. His brilliant generals, men like Belisarius and Narses, led armies across vast distances. They fought bravely in North Africa, Italy, and Spain, winning back huge parts of the old Roman Empire. These generals truly faced danger, led soldiers, and strategized on dusty battlefields. Yet, when the parades were held, much of the immense credit landed squarely on Justinian's shoulders. He was the emperor, the symbol, so the triumphs were seen as his. It's a bit like a big group project in school. One person presents the amazing work, giving a fantastic speech to the class. Everyone claps for them. But what about the quiet teammate who spent hours researching every detail? Or the artist who drew all the incredible illustrations? Their hard work made the presentation shine, but their names might not even be mentioned. That doesn't mean their effort wasn't vital though. So, looking back at figures like Justinian makes us think, true greatness isn't always about who gets the loudest cheers or the biggest statue. Sometimes, the most important work is done by those outside the spotlight, working tirelessly. Their quiet strength, their hidden efforts, often make the biggest difference. It reminds us to look deeper, beyond the famous names, to see all the hands that truly shape history. Justin too, his madness and cruelty. Have you ever wondered what happens when immense power meets a mind that starts to break? Imagine a ruler, meant to protect and guide, slowly losing their grip on reality. That's the tragic story of Justin II, an emperor who ruled ancient Rome's later empire. He started his reign with promise, even hope. People believed he would be a fair and wise leader. But then, something dark began to stir within him. His mind started to unravel, slowly at first, then picking up speed. He became terribly paranoid, convinced that everyone around him, even his closest advisors, were plotting against him. Can you picture living in that constant fear? Every shadow a threat, every whisper a conspiracy. This endless terror twisted his thoughts and actions, turning him cruel. He ordered people to be tortured, sometimes for no clear reason at all. There are even stories of him ordering men to be eaten alive by wild animals in public spectacles. A horror almost impossible to grasp. The empire itself was already facing huge problems, wars on its borders, money troubles, and a sense of growing unease. This crushing weight of responsibility and external threats likely pushed Justin's fragile mind even further over the edge. It's like when you're already super stressed about a big test, and then suddenly, a small problem, like your computer crashing, feels like the absolute end of the world. For Justin, that small problem was everyone he saw, and his test was the entire world. His fear wasn't just a feeling, it became a force, shaping his terrible decisions. His reign brought immense suffering and fear to his people. They lived in dread, never knowing who might be targeted next by the emperor's twisted imagination. It's a truly sad look at how a person's inner turmoil can shatter the lives of so many. It makes you think about how delicate the human mind can be, especially when burdened by such heavy power. And it reminds us that leaders carry more than just a crown. They carry the mental and emotional well-being of a nation. When that mind falls into chaos, it can drag everyone else down with it. It's a heavy truth, but one that history often shows us. Tiberius II Constantine, a generous man, but empire suffered. Have you ever wondered if being too kind, too giving, could actually cause problems instead of solving them? It's a strange thought, especially when we're taught that generosity is always a good thing. But for Emperor Tiberius II Constantine, His big heart and endless giving actually weakened the vast Roman Empire he was sworn to protect. He took the throne with a desire to make everyone happy, and for a while, he did. Imagine an emperor who just loved to give things away. He would open the treasury and shower his people with gold, beautiful jewels, and expensive silks. He freed many prisoners and even lowered taxes for a bit, trying to ease the burdens of daily life for his subjects. Naturally, people cheered for him. They adored their generous ruler, a man who seemed to genuinely care. But here's the thing about empires, especially one as huge and complicated as Rome. They need a constant flow of money. It's like a school needing funds for teachers, books, and keeping the building safe and warm. If the principal spent all the money on, say, giving every student a brand new video game console every month, there wouldn't be anything left for the important stuff. The Roman Empire needed massive amounts of cash to pay its soldiers, to guard its long borders from enemies, to repair essential roads and bridges, and simply to keep its complicated government running. Tiberius II's incredible generosity, while coming from the purest intentions, steadily drained Rome's bank account dry. The empire's wealth dwindled, and when an empire runs out of money, it gets weak. Its armies can't be paid, its defenses crumble, and its people become vulnerable to all sorts of dangers. So, this truly kind and generous man, by trying to make everyone happy in the short term, accidentally left the whole empire open to suffering in the long run. It makes you think, doesn't it, that sometimes the best intentions can have difficult consequences. It's a heavy lesson about leadership, that it's not just about making people smile today, but about making tough choices for a better tomorrow, even if those choices aren't popular right now. It's about protecting what matters most, even when it means holding back a little today for the strength of tomorrow. Maurice, his army rebelled. He lost everything. Have you ever felt like someone you really counted on suddenly let you down? Imagine that feeling, but 1,000 times bigger. That's a bit like what happened to Emperor Maurice of the Byzantine Empire. He was a powerful leader, but his choices pushed his soldiers too far. Maurice lived when Rome was mighty, facing many dangers. He needed his army to keep the empire safe. But leaders sometimes forget even strong armies are made of real people, people who get cold, hungry, and tired. Maurice cut soldiers' pay, made them stay on duty through harsh winters, far from home. He thought he was smart, but his soldiers felt ignored, unappreciated, and deeply mistreated. Think about a group project at school. If one person always makes decisions without asking for ideas, or expects everyone else to do all the hard work, what happens? Eventually, the rest of the group might just stop caring, or they might actively work against that leader. It's about feeling disrespected and unheard. Maurice's soldiers reached that point. Their loyalty broke. One day, Maurice told them to stay across the Danube River for the winter, instead of coming home. That was the last straw. They rebelled. Their anger and suffering had built up too long. They marched on the capital, not to protect their emperor, but to remove him. Maurice, who once held so much power, suddenly had nothing. His own people turned on him. He lost his throne, his family, and his life. Everything he had built crumbled. It makes you think how important it is to treat people well, even when you're in charge. Power isn't just about giving orders, it's about earning trust and respect from those who work for you. When that trust shatters, even great leaders can lose everything because they forgot to understand and care for their own people. Focus, the usurper who killed an emperor's family, Focus, the usurper who killed an emperor's family, Have you ever felt the strong pull of wanting to be in charge? It's a feeling we all know, a desire to lead, but for some, that hunger grows into something truly dangerous, blinding them. Imagine a soldier, not a king by birth, deciding he should rule. He would do anything to get that ultimate power. This is the tragic story of Focus. Focus was just a low-ranking officer in the Roman army, not royalty. But the emperor, Maurice, wasn't very popular. People were unhappy, and that feeling spread. Focus saw his chance. He gathered other soldiers. Together, they turned violently against their emperor. This is called a usurpation, when someone takes power illegally, by force. It's like if a student pushed the teacher out to take over the class. But imagine that on a country's scale, with armies and lives at stake. The worst part of Focus's rise wasn't just taking the throne. It was what he did next to erase any chance of the old emperor coming back. Focus ordered the execution of Emperor Maurice, right in front of his 5 young sons. Can you imagine the terror, the heartbreaking moment, watching your father and brothers taken away. Then, he had the sons killed too. This brutal act shows the deep darkness that blooms when ambition goes completely unchecked. It wasn't just about winning, it was about crushing all hope, leaving behind immense sadness and lasting fear. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does it truly cost to hold on to power when it's taken with such violence, such a lack of human feeling? When we think about focus, we see a reminder that true strength isn't just about control, it's also about empathy, about understanding the hurt that such actions leave behind, long after the shouting stops. Heraclius, early struggles, later success. But tough choices. Have you ever felt like everything was going wrong? Like a problem was too big to fix? Imagine being in charge of an entire empire feeling that way. That's where Heraclius found himself. When he took power, the Roman Empire in the east, what we call the Byzantine Empire, was truly struggling. Enemies were attacking from every side, taking huge chunks of land. People were losing hope, and Heraclius even thought about giving up, about moving the capital far away from the danger. He must have felt the crushing weight of that responsibility, the fear of watching everything fall apart on his watch. But here's the thing, he didn't give up. Instead, he made some incredibly difficult, almost impossible choices. He had to cut spending drastically, even from the church. He changed the army, making it more efficient but also harsher. He had to ask his people for huge sacrifices, for their last coin, for their sons to fight. Think of it like a sports team that's losing every game, and the coach has to make really tough decisions. Maybe the coach has to tell star players they're not performing, or cut players they like, or ask everyone to practice twice as hard, even when they're tired and discouraged. It's not about being popular, it's about trying to save the team, to save what matters. Heraclius led his armies himself, facing down enemies he wasn't expected to beat, and he did win. He brought the empire back from the brink of collapse, reclaiming lost lands, giving his people a reason to believe again. But these victories came at a great cost. The empire was exhausted, its people drained. The hard choices he made, the sacrifices he demanded, left scars. It teaches us something important. Sometimes, doing what's right and necessary for the many means making incredibly painful decisions. Success doesn't always feel joyful or easy. Sometimes, it's just the quiet relief that you somehow got through it, knowing the price that was paid. Constans too, the brother killer, hated by many. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be truly, deeply disliked by almost everyone around you? Imagine having so much power, but also carrying a secret so heavy, it overshadows everything else. This is a bit like the story of Constans too, an emperor with a dark stain on his reign, a man remembered not just for his rule, but for a terrible act of betrayal. Here's what happened. Constans too, driven by fear or ambition, made a choice that would haunt him forever. He ordered the murder of his younger brother, Theodosius. Think about that for a moment. To kill your own family, your own blood. In the Roman Empire, while emperors often did brutal things, killing a brother was seen as especially cruel and unnatural. It went against every idea of loyalty and family, which were incredibly important back then, just as they are today. People talked, and not in a good way. It's kind of like that feeling when you do something really wrong to someone you care about. Maybe you betray a friend's trust, or say something hurtful to a sibling. Even if no one else knows, that guilt can sit heavy in your stomach. For Constans, it was like that, but on a massive scale, with everyone knowing and judging. The Roman people never really forgave him. They saw him as a monster, and that hate followed him, no matter what he tried to achieve. This dark deed was always there, whispering in the background. His life became a series of military campaigns, always away from Constantinople, his capital, almost as if he was trying to escape his own reputation, or the city that remembered his crime. But you can't really escape yourself, can you? A choice like that leaves a mark, not just on history, but on the person who made it. It shows us that even with all the power in the world, some actions carry a price too high to pay, leaving a legacy of sorrow and condemnation, a quiet echo of what was lost. Constantine IV, his brothers tried to take his throne. Have you ever felt like someone close to you was jealous of what you had? Constantine IV, a Roman emperor, faced this in a heartbreaking way. Imagine being in charge of a vast empire, holding all the power, and then your own family, your younger brothers, tries to take that throne from you. It wasn't just them asking nicely. They were plotting, even trying to use the army. This shocking betrayal happened to Constantine IV, and it tells us a lot about the difficult dance between power, family, and loyalty. In the Roman Empire, being emperor was everything. It was your whole life, your family's future, and the empire's direction. Because the throne was such an ultimate prize, people would do almost anything to get it. Even brothers, who should have been close, could become dangerous enemies. Constantine IV had two younger brothers, Heraclius and Tiberius. They were given the title of co-emperors, sharing some honor, but Constantine IV held the true power. This setup, where family members had some claim, often led to dangerous rivalries. Think about a team, like a sports team or a school project. If one person is clearly the captain, and others feel they deserve that top spot, things get tense. Sometimes, people try to quietly undermine the leader. Here, it was much more serious. Heraclius and Tiberius believed they should have equal power. They tried to use the army to force Constantine IV to divide the vast Roman Empire into 3 equal parts. It was like cutting one huge pizza into 3 smaller pieces. But Constantine IV knew that would weaken the whole pie, making it vulnerable. In the end, Constantine IV had to make a hard choice to secure his rule and protect the empire. He had to deal with his own brothers in a way that reminds us how lonely and dangerous power can be, especially with family involved. Even when you're on top, the biggest, most painful threats can come from those closest to you. It makes you wonder what it must feel like when the people who should be your strongest allies turn against you. This story shows us that sometimes the hardest battles are fought not on a distant field, but right within your own family, right in the heart. It's a sad, powerful truth, and a real part of human history. Justinian too. His nose was cut off. He came back for revenge. Can you imagine being pushed down, humiliated, and then fighting your way back to the very top? This is exactly what happened to Justinian II, a Roman emperor from long ago. People in his empire grew unhappy with his rule, so they did something truly awful to him. They captured him, cut off his nose, and sent him far away into exile, believing he could never lead again. Here's the thing. In those ancient times, a leader was expected to appear perfect. Cutting off someone's nose wasn't just a brutal act. It was meant to disqualify him completely. It was a clear, harsh message. You are no longer fit to sit on the throne. Imagine the deep shame, the crushing feeling of being rejected and physically marked in such a way. But Justinian II was not a man who easily gave up. Think about it like this. Maybe you've experienced a big disappointment, like not making the team or failing a test you really studied for. It feels terrible, right? You might even want to quit. But some people, instead of giving up, use that hurt as fuel. They practice harder, learn more, and come back even stronger, proving everyone wrong. Justinian II did something similar, but on a much more intense and public stage. He spent many years in distant lands, but the burning memory of what they did to him, that profound injustice, kept his determination alive. He plotted, he waited, and against all odds, he managed to gather an army. He returned to Constantinople, his capital city, not only to reclaim his throne, but to get his revenge on those who had shamed him so deeply. His story truly shows us something powerful about the human spirit, the incredible strength to survive and fight back, no matter how much you've been hurt. But here's what I found. It also makes us wonder about the lasting cost of revenge. Does getting back at someone truly heal all the pain, or does it just leave more bitterness behind? It's a reminder that even in moments of triumph, some wounds run incredibly deep, and the path of anger can be a heavy one to carry for everyone involved. Leontis, he took the throne, then lost his nose. Have you ever wondered what it's like to stand at the very peak, to hold all the power, only to have it ripped away? For Leontis, a Roman emperor long ago, that question became a brutal, unforgettable reality. He was a general, strong and ambitious, who reached for the crown and took it, believing he could make a difference. But the path to power in ancient Rome was often paved with betrayal and cruelty, and his reign was fragile, like a house built on sand. One day, his enemies rose against him. They didn't just remove him from his throne. They did something far more chilling. They disfigured him. In a dark custom of that time, they cut off his nose. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Not just losing a battle, but losing a part of yourself, a defining feature of your face. This wasn't just a punishment. It was a powerful, terrible message. In their eyes, an emperor had to be perfect, without blemish. By taking his nose, they made sure he could never rule again, never stand before the people as a leader. He was marked, literally, for life, a living reminder of his failure. Think about how a small scar on your face can change how you feel about yourself, or how people look at you. Now, imagine something so much more severe, done intentionally to strip away your dignity and your future. It's like being forced to wear a sign that screams loser for the rest of your days, but it's permanently etched onto your very being. The physical pain would be immense, yes, but the deeper hurt, the emotional wound of such public humiliation, must have been unbearable. Leontus walked through the rest of his short life, his altered face a constant echo of what he had lost, not just an empire, but his place in the world, his very sense of self. It reminds us how easily power can corrupt those who seek it, and how often the drive for control leads to incredible acts of cruelty. Even centuries later, his story whispers a quiet warning about the human cost of ambition and the lasting pain of disgrace. Tiberius III, another usurper, another short rule. Have you ever felt like history just repeats itself, like watching the same scene play out again and again? Here's what happened with Tiberius III. He was a usurper. That's someone who takes power by force, not by right. Like many others, his time on the throne was short. He stepped into a role that felt almost cursed, a cycle of ambition and quick downfall. Imagine living when you never knew who'd be in charge next. One emperor would promise a fresh start, then another general would march in, overthrow him. This was exhausting for people, filled with deep, unsettling fear. Rome, in its later years, was stuck in this pattern. Every new ruler brought brief hope, quickly realizing it wouldn't last. It wasn't just about names, it meant constant uncertainty for families. Would the new guy be worse, more fighting? When someone violently took the throne, they usually saw weakness, an easy chance. But true strength, the kind that endures, isn't about taking what you want. It's about building trust and earning loyalty. Think about trying to win a big game by cheating. You might get ahead for a while, right? You might even feel a rush, but deep down, you know it's not fair. That win often doesn't feel good or last. Eventually, the truth comes out. These usurpers were a bit like that. They grabbed the crown, but rarely had solid support or a real plan. Their reign was built on shaky ground. So here's the thing about this endless loop of ambition. Power taken by force often vanishes as fast as it arrived. It makes us wonder, doesn't it? What's the point of grasping for something so desperately if it slips through your fingers so quickly? Perhaps true leadership isn't about the crown, but about steady, quiet work that builds something lasting, something people truly believe in, offering calm peace. Philippikos Bardanes, a blinded emperor, a blinded city. Have you ever thought about what it truly means to see, not just with your eyes, but to truly understand what's happening around you? Imagine a leader, an emperor, who suddenly loses that ability, both literally and figuratively. This is the story of Philippikos Bardanes, a man whose ambition blinded him. And then, in a cruel twist, he was physically blinded, plunging his world and parts of his empire into a profound darkness. Philippikos took power by force, overthrowing Emperor Justinian II. He was a general who saw his chance and seized it, but once he sat on the throne, he seemed to have blind spots. He spent much of his short reign arguing about religious beliefs, clashing with the church and other powerful figures. While he was busy with these debates, enemies were gathering at the borders. The empire needed a clear-sighted leader, but Philippikos was, in a way, already blind to the real threats. He couldn't see the danger outside because he was so focused on arguments within. Then came the end. His own troops rebelled, seizing him. The punishment for a deposed emperor, one that shocked and horrified, was often blinding. It meant he could no longer rule, could no longer be seen as fit for power. Think of it like a star athlete who suddenly loses the ability to move, to play their sport. All their talent, their purpose, feels gone in an instant. For Philippikos, his sight was taken. The vibrant city of Constantinople, which he once saw, became a blur, then nothing. And just as his eyes went dark, the city itself felt a kind of blindness, struggling without stable leadership. It was as if the empire lost its own vision. Stumbling forward, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of darkness falls when a leader cannot see, either because they refuse to, or because it's taken from them? The ripple effect spreads. It reminds us that true vision for a leader isn't just about what they can see with their eyes. It's about foresight, wisdom, and understanding the true needs of the people. And when that vision fails, everyone suffers, left to navigate a world that feels suddenly, terribly, blind. Anastasios too, emperor for a bit, then a monk. Have you ever thought about having everything, then suddenly losing it all? Imagine being the most powerful person in a huge empire, making big decisions, with everyone looking up to you. Then, almost overnight, it's gone. Your robes of power replaced by a simple, humble outfit, your palace by a quiet monastery cell. That's pretty much the story of Anastasios too. An emperor who ruled for a short time, then found himself on a very different path. He didn't choose to be emperor, he was kind of forced into it. He tried his best, making smart moves to defend the empire, but the ancient world was rough, full of power struggles and betrayals. When another general wanted the throne, Anastasios was overthrown. What do you do when you lose the biggest job? Most emperors would be executed, but Anastasios was given a different choice. Become a monk. Think of it like being the star player on a team, even the captain. Everyone expects you to lead and win. Then, one day, you're told you can't play anymore, or you join a different club, one focused on quiet reflection instead of loud victories. It's a huge shift. For Anastasios, trading his crown for a monk's cowl meant giving up earthly power, ambition, and his old identity. It was a life of prayer and simple tasks, a complete change from giving orders to armies. Later, he tried to get his power back, which shows how hard it is to let go of a grand past. But that attempt failed, and it cost him his life. His story makes you wonder about the true nature of power. Is it in the crown you wear, or how you face big change? Sometimes, the biggest strength isn't holding on to something, but finding a way to live with what you have, or even what you've lost. It reminds us that even when our plans fall apart, there can be a different kind of meaning, a quiet strength in choosing a new, unexpected path. Theodosius III. He didn't even want the job. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to rule an empire, to have ultimate power, to make all the big decisions? Most people dream of it, but what if that power was forced upon you? Imagine waking up one day, a quiet tax collector, and then, suddenly, you're made emperor. That's what happened to Theodosius III. He lived in a time, around the early 700s, when the Byzantine Empire was a mess. Emperors came and went, like changing seasons, often put on the throne by rebellious armies, and then quickly overthrown. It was a dangerous, lonely job, filled with plots and betrayals. Theodosius was chosen by soldiers who needed a figurehead, someone to rally around in their fight against another ruler. He wasn't a general, he wasn't a politician, and he certainly didn't seem to have grand ambitions. He was just a regular guy, going about his life. And then, here's the thing, they crowned him emperor. Think about it like this. Imagine you're in a big group for a school project, and suddenly everyone declares you the leader, even if you never volunteered, and you just wanted to help with the research. The weight of all those expectations, the fear of failing everyone, the knowledge that you're not prepared, it would feel crushing. Theodosius III must have felt that immense pressure. He was just a man caught in a political storm. He ruled for only about 2 years, a short, uneasy reign. When another, stronger general named Leo the Isaurian came along, Theodosius didn't fight to keep his crown. Instead, he made a deal. He would step down peacefully if his life, and the life of his family, was spared. And that's what happened. He gave up the purple robes, the heavy crown, and the constant fear. He became a monk with his son, living out his days in a monastery, far from the palace intrigues and the burden of power. Maybe, in his quiet life, he found a peace that few emperors ever knew. Sometimes, true strength isn't about grasping power, but about understanding when to let it go for something more valuable, a simple, safe life. Leo III, the Isaurian, destroying holy pictures. Have you ever looked at a photograph of someone you love, maybe a grandparent or a pet, and felt a rush of warmth? It's not just paper, it holds a memory, a feeling, right? Well, back in the Roman Empire, pictures of holy figures like Jesus, Mary, or saints were called icons. For many, these weren't just images, they were windows to heaven, powerful symbols that helped them feel closer to God. People prayed in front of them, touched them, and believed they could even perform miracles. So, imagine how people felt when Emperor Leo III, the Isaurian, stepped in. He believed that people were worshipping the pictures themselves, not what they represented. He thought this was wrong, like bowing down to a statue instead of thinking about the person it honors. This was a really old idea, going back to some of the first rules in the Bible, about not making idols. And so, Leo III gave an order that changed everything: destroy the holy pictures. He started a period known as iconoclasm, which literally means image breaking. Think about it like this: what if someone decided that your school's mascot or a team's flag was suddenly bad and had to be burned? And not just that, but it was something deeply tied to your identity, your history, your comfort. It would hurt, right? You'd feel confused, maybe angry, and like a part of you was being attacked. For the people of the empire, this was a deep blow. Their sacred art, which had offered them hope and solace for generations, was now being torn down, whitewashed, and defaced by their own emperor. It wasn't just paint and wood, it was their faith, their connection to something bigger than themselves, suddenly under attack. This decision caused huge arguments, even riots, and split the empire's people down the middle. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how something meant to inspire belief could become such a source of division. It shows us that what one person holds sacred, another might see as a mistake, and that difference can lead to profound sadness and conflict, leaving scars that last for centuries. Constantine v. Copronymus, the icon breaker's cruelty. Have you ever looked at a photograph of someone you love who is far away, and felt a real connection, a sense of their presence? For many people, religious paintings and statues, called icons, were like that, more than just art. They were windows to the divine. But Emperor Constantine V, called Copronymus, named by his enemies, thought differently. He believed these icons were idols, wrong to worship, and that people were confused, worshipping the image instead of what it represented. So, he began iconoclasm, image breaking. It wasn't just a suggestion. Constantine V enforced his views with terrifying cruelty. Imagine if something deeply personal, like a family photo or special heirloom, was suddenly declared illegal. If you refused to give it up, you faced punishment, perhaps jailed or worse. This is what happened to countless people under Constantine V. Monks and nuns, who held icons most dear, faced public shaming, whipping, eye gouging, or execution. It was a brutal campaign to control not just actions, but people's deepest beliefs. Think about how much your school mascot means to your team. It's just a picture, but it brings everyone together, represents pride and spirit. Now imagine if the principal suddenly banned all mascots, saying they were bad luck, and punished anyone who even drew one. That's a small glimpse of the emotional earthquake Constantine V caused. He tore away visible parts of people's faith, leaving many feeling lost and deeply hurt. And that's why it matters. This dark chapter shows how dangerous it is when someone with immense power tries to dictate what others hold sacred. It teaches us about the human need for belief and symbols, and the sadness that follows when those things are violently stripped away. It makes you think about respect, and the quiet spaces within us where our deepest feelings live. Irene of Athens, the empress who blinded her son. Have you ever thought about how far someone might go to keep what they believe is theirs? Imagine that what's theirs isn't just a toy or a special place, but an entire empire. This is the incredibly difficult story of Irene of Athens, a woman who craved the highest power so much. She made a choice that still echoes with horror today. She lived centuries ago, when the Roman Empire, though changed, still held immense sway. Irene was empress, but her son, Constantine VI, was coming of age. He was meant to take over, to step into his rightful place. But Irene had already tasted power, the control, the respect, the ability to shape nations. She felt it was hers, and she didn't want to give it up. In those times, power wasn't just a title, it was everything. It meant security, life or death for countless people, and immense personal influence. Her son becoming emperor was a direct threat to everything she had built and desired. It's like two people wanting the very last slice of pizza. But instead of just being hungry, one person might lose everything if they don't get it. For Irene, losing the throne was an unbearable thought. So, in a chilling turn of events, she decided she would not surrender her rule. To make sure her son could never challenge her again, she had him captured. And then, she gave an order that must have ripped through her own heart. Even as she gave it, her son, Constantine, was blinded. Blinding was a brutal, common way back then to make someone unfit to rule, removing any future threat. Think about the deepest trust you have with someone, say a parent, and then imagine that trust being shattered in the most painful way possible, all for power. This moment stands as a stark reminder of how ambition can twist a person, how the pursuit of control can lead to unthinkable acts. It makes us pause and consider the heavy cost of power and what truly defines a leader. Does a crown justify such a betrayal? Her story asks us to reflect on the dark side of human nature, showing us that sometimes the greatest tragedies happen not in battles, but in the quiet, terrible decisions made for a throne. Nicephorus, his greed led to his death. Have you ever wanted something so much it was all you could think about? What happens when wanting more and more takes over everything? This endless hunger can be a powerful force, but sometimes it can also be incredibly dangerous. Nicephorus, was a Roman emperor who fell deeply into this trap. He became known for his endless desire for money, for resources, for power. He wasn't just managing his empire's money well, he was consumed by a hunger for wealth. He raised taxes, often unfairly, making life hard for people. He even took money from the church. It wasn't about leading, it was about hoarding, growing his personal treasury at any cost. Here's the thing, sometimes what we chase so hard, what we focus on above everything else, can actually lead us straight into trouble. Think about playing a video game. You might really want to collect all the coins but if you get so focused on grabbing every single item, you might run straight into an enemy you weren't watching for, or accidentally fall off a cliff. Your intense focus on getting more can distract you from staying safe, or seeing the bigger picture. Nicephorus's greed pushed him to take bigger and bigger risks. He led his armies into Bulgaria, seeking not just victory, but more land, more people to tax, and more wealth. He was overly confident, sure of his success, but the Bulgarian ruler, Crum, was clever. He waited. Nicephorus and his vast army were caught off guard, trapped in a narrow mountain pass. It was a terrible defeat. Nicephorus was killed, his life ending violently in that distant land. His skull, a grim and shocking detail, was even turned into a drinking cup by Crum. His tireless pursuit of endless riches and power didn't bring him glory or safety. Instead, it led him directly to a brutal, humiliating end. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is there ever truly enough? Sometimes, the very thing we grasp so tightly, the thing we obsess over, can be what pulls us down. It reminds us that balance, and knowing when to stop, can be more valuable than any treasure. Michael Irangabe, a gentle emperor who couldn't lead. Have you ever known someone truly good? Someone kind to everyone, but when it came to making tough choices or leading a group, they just struggled. That's a bit like Michael Irangabe. He wasn't one of those cruel, power-hungry emperors we often hear about. He was actually very religious, a deeply pious man, known for his gentleness and generosity. He loved his family and truly believed in doing good. He sounds like a wonderful person, right? And he was. But being a good person isn't always the same as being a good leader, especially not in the Byzantine Empire, a world constantly filled with enemies and incredibly hard decisions. Imagine the empire as a ship in a dangerous storm. You need a captain who can make quick calls, someone decisive, even if it means upsetting some people to keep everyone safe. Michael, with his gentle heart, found this incredibly difficult. He would often consult too many advisors, waiting too long to act. He worried deeply about doing the right thing, which sometimes meant doing nothing at all. His empire was facing a major war with the Bulgarians. This was a brutal conflict, and Michael's indecision and soft approach cost the empire dearly. He was simply too gentle for the sharp, unforgiving world of power. Think about being the leader of a school project or a sports team. You might be the nicest person, always encouraging, but if a crucial problem comes up, a disagreement, or a tough decision that needs to be made right away, you have to step up. You need to make a clear call and stand by it, even if it feels hard. And that's why it matters. Michael's story is a quiet, sad lesson. It reminds us that leadership isn't just about good intentions or being kind. It's also about a different kind of strength. The strength to make hard choices, to stand firm, even when your heart aches. Michael wanted to do good, and he truly tried. But the world he lived in demanded a very different kind of emperor. His burden was too heavy. Leo V, the Armenian, another iconoclast, another murder. Have you ever seen people fight over something that seems really small, but it means everything to them? Imagine that, but with statues and pictures of saints, and the fight involves an emperor. That's what happened with Leo V. He was another Roman emperor who believed these holy images, called icons, were wrong. He thought people were worshipping the pictures themselves instead of God. This idea, called iconoclasm, was a huge, passionate debate. It wasn't just about art. It was about how people connected with their faith, how they felt about God. Here's the thing. Leo V saw trouble around the empire. He saw wars and losses, and he started to believe that God was unhappy with them because of these icons. It was like he thought, if we get rid of these things, maybe God will favor us again. Think about a time when a sports team loses a lot, and the fans start blaming a lucky charm or a jersey. They think changing that will change their luck. For Leo V, the stakes were much, much higher, the fate of an entire empire. So, he ordered the icons to be destroyed again. This made a lot of people angry and sad. For many, these images were a comfort, a way to feel close to the divine. Taking them away felt like ripping something sacred from their lives. But trying to force everyone to agree on something so personal, so deeply felt, often ends badly. Leo V found this out the hard way. There were plots against him, whispers in the dark. And on Christmas Eve, in 820 AD, as he was at morning prayers in a church, assassins dressed as priests attacked him. They were led by a former friend, Michael the Immortal. It was a brutal, shocking end, right in a holy place, on a holy day. His life ended, not with glory, but with violence and betrayal, all tangled up in beliefs and power. It reminds us how dangerous it can be when people confuse their own ideas of faith with universal truth, and how often, in history, such strong convictions lead to heartbreak and bloodshed. Michael the Amorian, rising from scandal, dealing with rebellions. How does someone lead an entire empire when their own path to power was steeped in shadows? Imagine Michael II, an emperor who took the throne not by right, but through a bloody, dramatic scandal. He was deeply involved in the plot that led to Emperor Leo V's violent end. Suddenly, and shockingly, he found himself wearing the heavy crown. It must have felt incredibly lonely, to know so many people doubted your right to rule, or even openly resented your presence. His reign began not with joy, but with a deep, unsettling whisper of betrayal that followed him everywhere. Almost immediately, he faced fierce, widespread rebellions. The most dangerous was led by Thomas the Slav. This was not a small protest. It was a full civil war, threatening to tear the Byzantine Empire apart. Think about this. Imagine you're put in charge of a big school project, but some classmates are convinced you cheated to get the role, or they just dislike you intensely. You don't just have to finish the project. You also deal with people actively trying to sabotage your work, spreading rumors, or starting rival projects. That immense pressure, that constant need to prove your worth while fighting attacks, is what Michael II lived with daily. He had to rebuild trust from nothing. He tried to unite a fractured people and protect the empire, all while his past cast a long shadow. His years on the throne weren't about grand conquests. They were a stubborn, exhausting fight for survival. He spent his time putting out constant fires, both inside his palace and across the empire. His story shows us that true strength isn't always how you rise to power. It's how you find the courage to endure the crushing storms that follow. Sometimes, the most important work is simply holding things together, even when the world tries to pull them apart. In that quiet, persistent effort, there's a different kind of heroism. Theophilus, a tough ruler who hated icons. Have you ever thought about how much we rely on pictures, a photo of a loved one, an emoji, to show how you feel? For thousands of years, people have used images to connect with things that matter deeply, especially their faith. But imagine a powerful ruler who believed these images were actually pulling people away from their true connection to what they believed in. That was Emperor Theophilus, a man whose stern rule left a lasting mark on history. Theophilus ruled the Byzantine Empire, a mighty realm where Christianity was central. But a huge argument had been brewing for ages. Were religious icons, those beautiful paintings of saints and Jesus, a helpful way to feel closer to God? Or were they dangerous idols, like worshipping a statue instead of the divine spirit itself? This was called iconoclasm, meaning image breaking. Theophilus stood firmly on the side of breaking images. He felt people were getting too caught up in the pictures, forgetting the real message. He saw it as a matter of purity, a way to make sure people's devotion was aimed directly, truly, at God. Think of it like this. If you really admire a historical figure, like a scientist or an artist, you might enjoy seeing their picture. But would you feel truly connected to their work just by looking at that photo? Or would you feel a deeper connection by reading their books, studying their discoveries, or listening to their music? Theophilos believed the true connection to faith should be direct, like reading the actual words or understanding the actual ideas, not just looking at a representation. He was convinced that icons created a barrier, a distraction from genuine spiritual feeling. His passion for this belief was so strong, it became a defining feature of his reign, causing deep sadness and anger among those who cherished their icons. So, Emperor Theophilos, with his rigid beliefs, showed us how even the purest intentions can lead to conflict. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the silent power of belief, and how different paths to devotion can create such profound differences in the world. It's a quiet reminder that what one person sees as purity, another might see as loss. Michael 3. The Drunken Emperor's Wild Life. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone holds immense power, but seems to care more about fun than duty? Think about Michael III, an emperor in ancient Rome. People often called him the Drunken Emperor. That nickname tells a big story, right? Here's the thing, he was in charge of a vast empire, a whole world of people depending on him. But Michael seemed to prefer wild parties, chariot races, and joking around instead of the serious work of ruling. Imagine for a moment you're given the lead role in a huge school play, or you're captain of the basketball team for the whole season. You have so much responsibility, everyone is counting on you, but instead of practicing or studying your lines, you just spend your time playing video games or hanging out, ignoring all your duties. What would happen to the play? What would happen to the team? Probably not good things. And that's kind of what happened with Michael III. He came to power young, and maybe the weight of the world felt too heavy, or maybe he just loved immediate pleasure too much. He'd host lavish banquets that went on for days, making fun of religious leaders, and even having mock processions. It sounds like a non-stop party, and maybe, for him, it was exciting. But while he was busy having a wild time, the empire faced real threats, real problems. His choices weren't just about him, they impacted millions though. Here's what happened. His carelessness weakened the very system he was supposed to protect. It created a feeling of instability and made people question who was truly in charge. His life was a stark reminder that true freedom and power aren't just about doing whatever you want. They come with heavy responsibilities. When we neglect those duties, even for the most exciting short-term fun, the long-term cost can be immense, affecting not just us, but everyone around us, and for generations to come. It makes you wonder what kind of legacy we really want to build. Basil 1. From peasant to emperor. By any means necessary. Have you ever wanted something so badly that you could almost taste it, and wondered how far you'd go to make it yours? Picture that hunger, but for a whole empire, for the very crown itself. This is the story of Basil I, a man who truly began with nothing. He wasn't born into wealth or power. He was a simple farmer's son, far from any glimmer of the imperial court. But inside him burned an ambition that refused to be put out. He knew he was meant for more than just a quiet life. So, Basil carved his own path. He was incredibly strong, charming, and smart about making the right connections. He moved from the countryside to the bustling capital, working his way into the emperor's inner circle. Emperor Michael III, a man who loved fun more than governing, took a liking to Basil, trusting him deeply, promoting him to high ranks. But Basil's vision wasn't just about being a powerful friend, it was about becoming the ruler. He started moving against rivals, sometimes with cold, hard violence. And then came the ultimate betrayal. He had Michael III, his own patron and friend, murdered in his bed. It was a ruthless, horrifying act, a stain on his rise to power. Think of it like this. Imagine you desperately want to be the captain of a team. You could work hard, improve your skills, and earn that spot fairly. Or, you could spread rumors about the current captain, sabotage their performance, or even turn your teammates against them. You might get the captaincy, but what would that victory really feel like? Would you truly feel like a leader, or would the shadow of how you got there always linger? Basil I did reach the very top. He became emperor, founding a new family line that ruled for centuries. But every single step of his climb was covered in the darkness of treachery and the blood of those he pushed aside. It makes you pause and think, doesn't it? Is any throne, any position, truly worth such a terrible cost? Maybe the real strength isn't just about reaching the peak, but about how you managed to get there, and the kind of person you became on the journey. Leo VI, the Wise. For marriages, big problems with the church ***. Leo VI, the Wise. For marriages, Big problems with the church asterisk. Have you ever felt like what you deeply wanted was directly against the rules? Imagine being an emperor, powerful, yet your heart's desire clashes with something even bigger, the church. This describes Emperor Leo VI. Here's the thing. Around the year 900, the church had very strict rules about marriage. 1 or 2 marriages were okay, especially if a spouse died. But a third was a serious issue, even a sin. A fourth was truly unthinkable, practically forbidden. It deeply challenged the church's teachings, which valued stability. Viewing many marriages as human frailty, Leo VI faced profound personal sorrow. He desperately needed a male heir for the empire's future. His first wife died, no son. His second wife died, still no son. His third wife, Eudokia, finally bore a son, but then both she and the baby died. Imagine that, crushing grief. Losing 3 partners and still lacking the heir vital for his legacy. Driven by this need, Leo did something shocking. He fell in love with Zoe and had an out-of-wedlock son with her. To legitimize his son and secure the empire, he wanted to marry Zoe, his 4th marriage. This sparked a massive crisis. Church leaders were furious. He disrespected sacred traditions. His family needs crashed into centuries of religious doctrine, like a square peg in a round hole. This caused deep division, forcing people to choose between their emperor and their faith. Sometimes, even the wisest people find themselves caught between their deepest desires and unbending rules. It reminds us that even with great power, some battles are quietly fought in a broken heart, against ancient beliefs. Alexander, his short reign of neglect. Have you ever thought about how sometimes doing nothing at all can cause as much pain as doing something truly terrible? It's a quiet kind of harm, isn't it? That's what we see with Alexander Severus, an emperor who came to power when he was just a teenager. He wasn't a cruel tyrant, not like some of the others we'll talk about. But here's the thing, Rome didn't just need a good person on the throne. It needed a strong leader, someone ready to make tough choices and guide a huge empire. Alexander, though, was young and often controlled by his mother. He meant well, perhaps, but his reign became a slow story of neglect. Imagine a beautiful garden. If you don't water the plants, or pull the weeds, or protect them from harsh weather, they don't just suddenly die. Instead, they slowly wither. Leaves turn brown, flowers droop, and the whole garden just loses its life, bit by bit. It's not a sudden storm that destroys it, but the quiet absence of care. That's a bit like what happened to Rome under Alexander. While he wasn't actively harming his people, he also wasn't truly leading them. He let the army grow restless, ignored important issues, and allowed others to gain too much power. And that's why it matters. Trust started to fade. People felt unprotected. The borders became less secure. It was a slow unraveling, not a violent explosion. The deep sadness of his reign wasn't in any grand evil act, but in the slow, quiet decay that comes from a lack of true attention and guidance. It teaches us that sometimes the most profound damage can be done not by a harsh blow, but by the simple, constant absence of care. Romanos primera lica penos, the emperor who exiled his own sons. Imagine a parent facing a choice no one ever wants to make. A choice between the love for your own children and the powerful, burning need to keep control. That's the heavy burden that fell upon Romanos I Lycopenos, an emperor of Byzantium who rose from humble beginnings to grasp the imperial throne. He wasn't born royalty. Not like some other emperors, Romanos fought his way up, smart and ruthless. And when he finally reached the peak, he tried to secure his legacy, his family's place in history, by making his own sons cum. You'd think this would make them strong, united. But the throne is a dangerous place, and power, it turns out, can be a poison. Over time, suspicion grew. Maybe his sons grew too ambitious, too hungry for the ultimate power. Or perhaps Romanos became consumed by the fear of losing what he had worked so hard to gain. In the world of empires, a strong handshake can turn into a dagger in the back. The thought that his own blood might betray him, might try to push him aside, must have been a crushing weight on his heart. So, in a move that still echoes with a quiet tragedy, Romanos made a terrible decision. To protect his rule, to prevent a power struggle that could tear the empire apart, he sent his sons away, not just to another city, but to places like distant monasteries, stripped of their titles, their influence, their very connection to the life they knew. It was like taking all your favorite toys and giving them away, not because you wanted to, but because you felt they were somehow a threat to your most important possession. Think about it like this. A coach has a star player, incredibly talented, but that player starts to question every call, challenging the coach's leadership in front of the whole team. To maintain order, to keep the team together, the coach might have to bench that player, even send them away from the team. But this was far more permanent, far more heartbreaking. What kind of father does this? The kind who wears a crown that feels heavier than lead. The kind who understands that the price of supreme power can often be paid with the deepest human bonds. It reminds us that sometimes the very ambition that brings greatness can also bring profound loneliness, leaving behind a trail of sorrow, even within one's own family. It makes you wonder if all that power was worth the silence at the family table. Nicephorus, to focus, the warrior emperor who was murdered. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be absolutely at the top? To have proven yourself strong and capable, only for everything to fall apart because of someone you trusted? That's what happened to Nicephorus. He was an emperor, a true warrior who led his armies to victory again and again, pushing back enemies and making his empire stronger. People saw him as a hero, a tough leader who got things done. He was known for his courage on the battlefield, his sharp mind for strategy. He literally shaped his world through sheer force of will and military might. But here's the thing about power. It can attract danger, not just from outside enemies, but from within. Nicephorus wasn't killed by an enemy soldier in a grand battle. Instead, his life was ended in the darkest way possible: betrayal. He was murdered in his own palace, in his own bed, by people he was supposed to be safe with. His own wife, Theo, plotted against him with her lover, John Zim, who was also a trusted general. It's a bit like if you're the star player on a sports team, and you've worked really hard, led your team to win championship after championship. Everyone looks up to you, but then, your closest teammate, someone you share all your secrets and strategies with, secretly decides they want your spot. And so, they work with another friend, someone you also trust, to push you out in a truly unfair way. It's not about losing fairly. It's about a deep, cutting betrayal that breaks everything you believed in. Nicephorus faced that kind of treachery. So, here's what happened. On a cold night, his assassins, led by his own wife's lover, snuck into the palace. They found the great warrior, the fearsome emperor, asleep. He was killed right there. It's a stark reminder that even the most powerful, the bravest, can be vulnerable. True danger often comes from the quiet whispers, the hidden plots, and the broken trust of those closest to us, rather than the loud clashes of war. It shows how human desires like ambition and jealousy can twist even the most sacred bonds.